Order. Just waiting for the recording to start. Okay. Welcome to meeting number 12 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. Pursuant to the order of reference of Tuesday, April 11th, the committee is meeting to discuss the parliamentary duties in context of the COVID-19 pandemic. Before we start, I want to inform the members that pursuant to this order of reference, the committee is meeting for two reasons. Number one, for the purpose of undertaking a study and receiving evidence concerning matters related to the conduct of parliamentary duties in the context of COVID-19. And number two, to prepare and present a report to the House by May 15 on the said study. The order of reference also stipulates that only motions needed to determine witnesses and motions related to the adoption of the report are in order. Today's meeting is taking place via video conference, and the proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. So you are aware, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee on that webcast. In order to facilitate the work of our interpreters and ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. Interpretation in this video conference will work very much like in a regular committee meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. When you are ready to speak, you can either click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, or you can hold down the space bar while you are speaking. When you release the space bar, your mic will unmute. Will mute itself, just like a walkie-talkie. So when you have it pressed down, you're able to speak. When you release, you'll be back on mute. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. Should members need to request the floor outside of their designated time for questions, they should activate their mic and state that they have a point of order. If a member wishes to intervene on the point of order that has been raised by another member, they should use the raised hand function. This will signal to the chair your interest to speak. In order to do so, you can click on participants at the bottom of your screen, and when the list pops up, you will see next to your name that you can click the raised hand function, or it might be at the bottom of your participants list. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. The use of the headset is strongly encouraged. Should any technical challenges arise, for example, in relation to interpretation or a problem with your audio arises, please advise the chair immediately, and the technical team will work to resolve them. Please note that we may need to suspend during these times as we need to ensure that all members are able to participate fully. Before we get started, can everyone click on their screen in the top right-hand corner and ensure that they are on gallery view? With this view, you should be able to see all the participants in a grid view. It will ensure that all video participants can see one another. During this meeting, we will follow the same rules that usually apply to opening statements and the questioning of witnesses during our regular meeting. Per the routine of motions of the committee, each witness has, per the routine motions of the committee, each witness has up to 10 minutes for an opening statement, followed by the usual rounds of questioning from members. However, due to the size of the witness panel, I'm asking that all witnesses be as brief as possible in their opening statements in order to allow as much time as possible for questions by the committee members. Just as we usually would in a regular committee meeting, we will suspend in between panels in order to allow the first group of witnesses to depart and for the next panel to join the meeting. I'd now like to welcome our witnesses. We will start with, I believe, Ms. Cack. We'll start with Ms. Cack if we do not have Ms. Ashton here yet. Do we have Ms. Ashton? No. Okay, let's hear from Ms. Kakak, please.
Matna, thank you for having me. So I understand that we have some time limitations. So I had provided a couple pages of briefing notes, so I'll try and go through them as quickly as I can. So thank you for giving me the opportunity, first and foremost, to speak at this committee. My name is Momila Qaqqaq. I'm the Member of Parliament for Nunavut. Nunavut is Canada's youngest territory, and I'm proud to be the youngest person elected in the riding, as one of the youngest voices in this parliament as well. Nunavut is also the largest electoral district in the world, with a population of approximately 39,000 people. I was raised in Baker Lake, a growing community of 2,000. I now live in the capital of the territory, Iqaluit, which has a population of about 8,000. All 25 communities in my riding are fly in and fly out, with no roads to connect families and people across communities. Approximately 85% of my constituents are Inuk or Inuit. I'm currently speaking to everybody here on the committee from Ottawa, and I can't confidently say I could participate in a virtual parliament or a virtual committee if I were actually in my riding. Connectivity is essential. Unfortunately, our territory has had the highest suicide rate per capita in Canada. This has tragically been the case for years. I grew up with this being perceived as our normal, which is wrong. I have lost countless friends and family to suicide. Everyone in the territory is in some way touched by suicide. This reflects the social determinants for individuals in the territory. 1/3 of my constituents live in overcrowded homes. We also know that 7 out of 10 children go to school hungry in Nunavut. And there are communities that continue to see boil water advisories and limited access to clean drinking water. We have some of the highest living costs in the country. Along with investments in housing, building basic infrastructure is a must in the territory. Connectivity is essential. Accessing critical and often life-saving information is frequently a challenge in Nunavut. Providing individuals with key information in our mother tongue, Inuktitut, can be life-saving. In 2016, 23,225, approximately 65% of the population reported Inuktitut as their mother tongue. I was glad to see during the previous parliamentary session an announcement that talked to a commitment of $42 million over the next 5 years to support Inuktitut language initiatives. This was in collaboration between the Government of Canada, the Government of Nunavut, and Nunavut Dungavik Incorporated, the Inuit Territorial Advocacy Organization. Although the intentions of this agreement are good, I myself face many barriers as a member of parliament in providing needed translation for my constituents. For example, I would need to translate all of my work 5 times to make sure information is easily available for everyone. Guiding constituents to federal services, they have these obstacles that they face. Providing translation in Inuktitut at the federal level for my constituency and other Inuit Nungangat communities would be nothing but beneficial for everyone. Connectivity is essential. As we saw during yesterday's committee, even in some of the most prosperous parts of the country, technical limitations are impacting parliamentarians' ability to do their work. I thought it was important for everyone here at the committee today to get a sense of the internet speeds here in Ottawa compared to communities in Nunavut. I had reached out to some constituents and asked for their Mbps or megabytes per second, and was frustrated but not surprised by some of the numbers that I heard. So for example, I did my own testing. Again, I'm here in Ottawa, and with my phone, my data, my phone plan, I have 180 megabytes per second. With my Wi-Fi, I have 200 megabytes per second. Please keep in mind that you need at least 8 megabytes per second to run a high definition video conferencing call, and these results will be impacted if you are sharing a network with other people. So some of the constituent responses I have, and I tried to hit all 3 of my regions. So in Cambridge Bay, we see Wi-Fi at 14 megabytes per second, Cambridge Bay, data with 51. In Baker Lake, my hometown, Wi-Fi, again at 14 megabytes per second. Baker Lake, data at 85 megabytes per second. Outlet, Wi-Fi 6 megabytes per second and data 51 megabytes per second. In Sunny Kilwa, with Wi-Fi 2 megabytes per second and with data in Sunny Kilwa 13 megabytes per second. Connectivity is essential. And now this isn't a part of my notes, but a minister addressed earlier this afternoon during session. They had thanked the member for the question and the issue about rural broadband in his region. We know before the COVID-19 crisis began, the government recognized that fast, reliable, and affordable high-speed internet is a necessity, not a luxury. So clearly, the federal government level knows that this is a problem. We continue to see large corporations like Bell charge ridiculous prices across Canada. I think everyone here would agree that hours and hours of streaming parliamentary business on their data plans could result in some outrageous overage charges. During this crisis, we have also heard stories of cell phone and internet providers suddenly charging Canadians more. How can we ask families to stay at home, parents to continue working, and students to learn through online resources without providing affordable and accessible internet services? When I say this, I want you to keep in mind the fundamental human rights issues I had previously mentioned, that there are too many of my constituents, Nunavut Canadians, are facing. Northwestel, one of the major telecom companies in Nunavut, has fortunately provided temporary internet usage relief until May 31st for existing customers, which is one way we should be taking care of each other right now. Connectivity is essential. With this in mind, I would like to talk about the proposed Givalak hydro fiber link. I would like to echo the words of Premier Joe Savikata when he said, the proposed Manitoba-Nunavut hydroelectric power line transmission and fiber optics project aligns with our Durak Davut mandate, Nunavut's growing telecommunication needs, and the Government of Canada's goals to reduce the effects of climate change. The Kivalak Hydro Fiber Link is an opportunity to not only promote cleaner energy, but to provide much needed internet and data supports for communities. We have yet to see the support needed from the federal government for this project. Connectivity is essential. The amount of needed services in Nunavut is extremely high. Increasing accessible and affordable connectivity services could save lives. We could promote online counseling, education resource exchange, share information among one another, and so many other beneficial things. Again, I'd like to thank everybody for this opportunity. I hope I was able to capture the basis of the reality in my writing and why connectivity is essential. There is much opportunity for us to do great things and provide these services to the people that need it. Matna, thank you.
Thank you, MP Kakak. Next, can we hear from MP Ashton, please?
Hello, can you hear me? Great. Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, fellow colleagues. Thank you for having me as a witness today. It's unusual to be on this side of the table or the screen as a witness at this committee. I truly value the opportunity to share the perspective of many in our region as your committee finds ways to make virtual parliament work. First, I want to be clear. I am a proponent of a virtual parliament. I've spoken out publicly about the need for a virtual parliament early on in this pandemic. I have also spoken out about the need to make parliament more accessible, including virtually, for some time even before this. Currently, we are living in an unprecedented time of crisis. Many Canadians have had to take unprecedented steps to stay safe. Physical distancing, work from home if possible, juggling full-time parenting with work. For others, including essential workers, staying home is not an option, and many are dealing with the crisis of losing their jobs. Throughout this time, our work as representatives and advocates has, if anything, become even more important. Over the last number of weeks, I've been in close contact with First Nations leaders in our region, doing everything they can to keep their communities safe, desperate for federal action. I've been in touch with frontline workers who don't have enough access to the personal protective equipment they need. I've been in touch with workers in work camps and mines across our north who are afraid to go to work because of a possible spread of COVID-19. I've been in touch with constituents stranded abroad, students who don't know how they'll pay their rent, seniors who are in need of support. Our work has not stopped, but without Parliament and access to the accountability mechanisms that are integral to it, our ability to make change has been deeply impacted. I, like many of you, have been in contact with ministers, parliamentary secretaries, and the media, doing everything possible to get action for our region. That is important, but fundamentally, we are members of Parliament. Canadians expect us to represent them in Parliament, whether we are in government or in opposition. Let's recognize that at a time when people who can are encouraged to work remotely, including the work of Parliament. Let's be responsible in terms of our work. When we are told that we could be super carriers of COVID-19, let's do everything possible to do our work safely from home. Research has indicated that we could be dealing with future and possible multiple waves of the coronavirus. This isn't a matter of weeks, but months and even years. We must be seen as leaders in terms of public health and do everything we can to keep our communities safe, including refraining from traveling across the country on a regular basis when we could be doing this work from home. Right now, here in my home region, we have a travel restriction where people who do not live north of the 53rd parallel are not allowed to come in unless they work here. Non-essential travel is not recommended. These are public measures reflective of how vulnerable our region is. There are also widespread public health recommendations to avoid interprovincial travel. Given our work as leaders, we must go above and beyond to keep our communities safe and do our work from home. A virtual parliament is critical in terms of regional representation. Until now, no Manitoba MPs have attended an emergency sitting of Parliament from any party. We know that, again, for public health reasons, that emergency sittings and the in-person sitting today are dominated by MPs from central Canada and in close proximity to Ottawa. This is not acceptable. A virtual parliament is critical in terms of gender representation. Based on research by Samara Canada, it has been noted that the percentage of women in the House during emergency sittings has ranged from 25 to 27%. While reflective of our general representation, which remains pathetic, the fact is that a virtual parliament can allow for women MPs to be heard across the country and for parties to ensure that their voices, our voices, are heard. Let's also recognize that other jurisdictions have taken on this work already and have put in place parliamentary sittings virtually. Jurisdictions such as Wales, the UK, the European Parliament, the Ukraine, Argentina, and the list goes on. But in setting up a virtual parliament, we must recognize that we are not equal as MPs. Our region here in northern Manitoba, like much of rural and northern Canada, has extremely poor access to the internet. The Winnipeg Free Press recently reported on the fact that according to the CRTC, Manitoba has some of the slowest internet speeds in Canada. A CRTC map of broadband coverage shows major gaps across our province. An internal briefing note prepared by Industry Canada noted that as of August 2018, quote, Northern Manitoba has the worst connectivity in all of Canada, unquote. Nationally, only 27.7% of First Nations and 37.2% of rural communities have access to fast, reliable internet. This crisis is exposing the second-class access to critical infrastructure that many on First Nations and in rural Canada are living right now. It is exposing a glaring and growing inequality in our country. It's having a negative impact on our kids and kids who already face immense barriers. A CBC report recently made it clear that for First Nations kids in remote communities like Garden Hill here in our region, online learning is simply not possible. Catherine Monias, Garden Hills Education Director, said when asked about offering online learning, quote, "We can't. Most students do not have access to a computer and a printer, and most students do not have internet at home," unquote. And even if there was more access to the internet, Ms. Monias pointed out, quote, "Our internet bandwidth is so narrow that it's impossible to teach online," unquote. I have heard from worried parents, frustrated educators, and leaders from our region who are concerned about their young people's ability to access an education. We cannot have a situation where a generation of kids is held back because of our failures. My office and I have also heard directly from constituents who have no access or unreliable access to the internet when it comes to applying for EI, the CRB, or getting help from Service Canada. This cannot stand, and we must be clear that it didn't just happen. Successive governments' choices to fund private enterprise in the hopes of providing broadband has failed. Good public money has been poured into initiatives that have not solved the problem. Years of conservative and liberal promises to ensure access to broadband internet have failed. We've heard the campaign commitments and seen the posters, but no internet. I know of one community in our region that accessed the federal funds some years ago to build a tower only to have the tower bought out by our main telecom provider and then dismantled. To this day, they do not have access to broadband internet. It's 2020, and in one of the wealthiest countries in the world, we face a shocking and unacceptable digital divide. This pandemic crisis should be a wake-up call. We need the government to recognize access to broadband internet as a public good, a basic necessity, an essential service. The government must use public ownership to ensure the construction of broadband internet infrastructure and ensure regulated and affordable service. It should also work with First Nations and Indigenous communities. Many have compared dealing with this crisis to a wartime effort, that we should be looking within to provide what we need. We are an incredibly wealthy country. Let's respond to the urgent needs of people at this time and into the future through national action now to ensure equal internet access for all. Let's come out of this crisis better than we were. Let's build a Canada where we are not letting down the next generation and where we are not contributing to growing inequality. Canadians, including the youngest amongst us, are counting on us to do this. Let's get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ashton. Next, can we have Chantal Bernier, please?
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very pleased to joining you in your work on this very relevant issue. My name is Chantal Bernier. I'm a lawyer specialized in privacy rights and cybersecurity. I know that you invited me here today to present issues regarding information security associated with a virtual sitting of the House of Commons. I understand your concern, especially in light of the reports on the risks for security of information on some platforms. However, these risks have to be put in context. First of all, they only apply to certain types of information, and secondly, they only apply to confidential debates. I will be discussing those distinctions. I will now speak English.
In relation to the type of information you must protect by law as a public institution, there are two that are most relevant to your work. The first category of protected information I will mention is information received in confidence in relation to the affairs of the Government of Canada or received from another government, because the disclosure of such information would be injurious to the interests of the Government of Canada. This type of information would never arise in the House of Commons. Should it arise in committee meetings, then the committee should go in camera. And then the chair should ensure that additional information security measures are applied proportionate to the sensitivity of the information involved. The chair should not proceed to an in-camera meeting unless there is assurance from the technology experts of the House of Commons that it can proceed online securely. As a former senior public servant who had to lock her device in a little box every time I attended cabinet meetings, I can assure you that the government of Canada has a long tradition of information security. The second category of protected information I will mention is personal information. Personal information is defined as information that relates to an identified or identifiable individual, meaning that even if the information can be related to an individual only indirectly, it is still personal information, and you must, by law, protect it. However, there are exceptions that are relevant to your work. These are types of personal information that you do not have to protect. The first is information about an individual who is or was an officer or employee of the government institution, where the information involved relates to the function of that employee or officer. You also do not have to protect the fact that an individual is or was a ministerial advisor or a member of ministerial staff, as well as the individual's name or title. You do not have to protect information about an individual who is or was performing services under contract for a government institution when the information, again, relates to that contract. And finally, information relating to any discretionary benefit of financial nature for individuals, such as granting of a license or permit, is also not subject to protection and can be disclosed. In other words, the protection of personal information cannot undermine government accountability. Moving then to the type of proceedings that call for security measures. Sittings of the House of Commons and meeting of House committees, except where they must go in camera, do not create security risks. Quite the opposite. Because House debates are always public and are accessible directly from anyone's computer at any time, moving online preserves transparency of Parliament more than it creates information security risks. But while I'm here, I would like to bring to your attention real information security risks that have not made the news. I am referring to telework. Working remotely in our houses raises information security risks, and I speak from practical cases I have seen. The main risks are these. The first one comes from the fact that many of us share a home. Telework means that the arrangements must provide physical protection of confidential information. Not everyone has a house big enough to allow a separate room to work in. Measures must therefore be adapted to each physical setting to protect information on both paper and screens. Government documents should never be transferred to personal electronic devices. These devices are not configured in accordance with government information security standards. Government electronic devices should also not be made accessible to anyone except the government employee to whom the device has been assigned, even for temporary use. The devices are most likely to contain documents protected by law, and access by an unauthorized person constitutes a breach. While passwords are the basis of security on electronic devices, they become even more important in the context of telework, meaning an environment where you are around people who know you very well and therefore could guess your password, not necessarily for nefarious reasons, perhaps only because they want to use the computer. Still, it constitutes a security risk. Without the entry-exit controls of Parliament offices, screens should be set to lock automatically when they are not used for a set period. And that set period should be as short as necessary according to the circumstances. Privacy filters on a computer can be used to hide the screen, make it not visible to others. And finally, I would caution you from the accidental use of one's personal email for professional use. In the home environment, this confusion risk is higher. Je passe maintenant au français.
I'm now going to speak in French. To put it simply, I'd like to reassure you and at the same time caution you. I can reassure you by putting the issue of information security as it relates to your work in context. Except when you are working in camera. Internet actually assures a level of transparency that we would like to see in the House of Commons, as opposed to creating a risk to information security. Now, when you need to sit in camera, you need to make sure, Madam Chair and your colleagues, that all measures, all protective measures commensurate with the sensitive nature of the information will be taken. Now, as a caution, I would encourage you to have a discussion with all members of your staff about protection of the information and what measures they have taken when working remotely. Thank you for your attention. I'd be happy to respond to your questions.
Thank you. Can we hear from Mr. Lou Prichet, please, Professor of Political Science at the Royal Military College of Canada?
Thank you, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to testify before your committee. It gives me great pleasure to appear and to answer your questions in both official languages.
Remarks about cybersecurity in the current context, and then pass to some broader remarks about the continuity of constitutional government in the context of an emergency and a crisis. I shall edit those remarks and I shall indicate to the translators the edits. You have the full written version in front of you in both official languages. With regards to cybersecurity, just a few brief considerations. The deliberations that you're having are hard to mess with because they're real time and they're open, so tricks like deep faking, what somebody might be saying seems to me to be pretty hard and difficult to make effective. I know in the next panel there's somebody who's going to raise concerns about the Zoom technology, but I actually think that this is not particularly relevant in the current context because, yes, end-to-end encryption is the highest, is the gold standard. But in this case, we're talking about an open parliament and open conversations. So if we have end-to-server encryption, look, we want people to be looking in anyways if our adversary wants to listen in and see what a resilient democratic conversation looks like, all the better. And look, no matter what tool you're going to use, all the tools have vulnerabilities and are somewhat insecure. Some are less secure than others, but inherently, there's always an issue with regards to compromise. I actually think that this is a misguided conversation, that this points to technological determinism, and technology is not ultimately the issue. It's behavior that's the issue. It's how we use the cyber and cybersecurity, the cyber domain. And so we need to have a more human-centric conversation about cybersecurity. Many of the measures technologically can be readily solved, as your parliamentary administrators already have, with regards to Zoom, sending passwords separately, locking down meetings. But really, it's a matter of what conversation can we simply not have online, because we have to assume the conversation is compromised. There's still a lot you can learn from the metadata, even if you have end-to-end encryption. And are you logging in through a virtual private network when you're logging in as a member of parliament, for instance? The greatest risk is probably not the software, but it's your personal device. Is it already compromised? What kind of device are you using? What mechanisms are you using to connect, hardwired versus mobile? Are you on an approved device? Is the device hardwired on a secure network with unique IP identifiers, with a KPI card? And are we routing the traffic through a Canadian network to ensure Canadian data sovereignty, or is it being routed the most efficient way? All this is to show that we need to think in terms of human-centric terms, including how our adversaries might be thinking about this environment and their intent, not in tech-centric terms. And so it's about human factors of cybersecurity, and humans are ultimately the greatest vulnerability, but they're also an underused asset. And so I point to, I think, this conversation that we're having, to 9 issues with regards to human factors in cyber and cybersecurity that we are all experiencing every day. The first is societal issues. How do we ensure that our democracy and our institutions are adequately defended? How do we ensure that they are cyber resilient? How do we adapt our democratic institutions? And how do we ensure that we have evidence-based policies? With regards to regulation, we want to think about how we protect privacy, how we increase transparency and accountability, and how we standardize cybersecurity. And in terms of behavior, we want to think about criminal networks, about enabling the behavioral change by users, and designing more usable machines and more usable interfaces. This ultimately leads me to the questions about what is the role of Parliament? And ultimately, the underlying primary constitutional principle here is the principle of responsible government. It is about ministerial responsibility, first and foremost during a crisis and an emergency. It is about holding government to account, and it is in the Westminster parliamentary system about parliamentary supremacy. What does this mean concretely? Voting supply, on spending, on accountability, but also on how we raise revenue. And I'm deeply concerned about how Parliament has had very little say in how we raise revenue. Usually we think of this as taxation. But what we have seen in recent weeks is the largest and most rapid expansion of government in the post-war era. It has imposed unprecedented intergenerational burdens. We have seen this previously. The percentage of the debt this year is roughly, that is being taken up in new debt, is roughly that what it was in the early 1980s, and it hobbled government for a generation and led to a considerable fiscal challenges down the road and hamstringing governments. So what are the mechanisms that are being deployed to ensure that the spending that we are taking up is the most efficient, the most effective? I'm deeply concerned that in the current environment, the temptation about privatizing profits and socializing debt, including private debt, when we restart the economy, people are already talking about infrastructure, but this is, of course, what some people have called the she session, that unlike 2008, the people who are disproportionately affected are women, and are women in precarious situations. Building lots of bridges, roadways, and subways is not going to help them directly, at least. So how do we think about how we restart the economy? And I think in all this, the Parliament has a very important role to play. I shall now pass to my remarks. I shall read from the first page and then extract lines from subsequent pages. This is the greatest test for the maintenance of Canada's democratic constitutional government, constitutional order in at least 50 years. It raises many important questions. What is the legitimate extent of the federal government's power during an emergency? Is the federal civil service that drives Canada's federal system for coordinated emergency response a boon or a bane during a complex, multi-jurisdictional, prolonged emergency? Did the Prime Minister get the best advice? Was the Prime Minister aware that the WHO has had the World Health Organization has had a very close relationship with China since 1957? These challenges are not new. What is the appropriate role before, during, and into a recovery of the executive, judiciary, and legislative branches? To what extent can the executive abrogate civil and privacy rights in the public and common interests, especially if citizens' confidence were to falter? Metadata will be an important part for mobile devices in reopening, in particular aggregate metadata, understanding people's behavior, and these require conversations. And so to what extent do the proximate failures of the Canadian government to protect the safety and security of its citizens at home and abroad expose distal failures and weaknesses in intelligence, strategic assessments, emergency preparedness, continuity of constitutional government, the civil services capacity and commitment to provide the best possible impartial advice to the government of the day, along with weaknesses and structures in the structures and institutions of the Government of Canada and constitutional governance? After all, many democracies have fared significantly better than Canada in speed and agility with which they responded to the epidemic, without the massive expansion of the state to which Canada has had to resort at a cost of billions of dollars. The underlying rationale for the answers to these questions needs to be transparent and intelligible. There's questions about proportionality and suitability of these measures, the fundamental transformation of the social and economic role of the state and public sector, whose expansion in recent weeks is without precedent in the post-war era. There's no precedent within living memory of anyone in a position of leadership about how to govern in this crisis. And so Canada's democratic institutional order is absolutely critical. It is insufficient simply to tolerate criticism. The resilience and superiority of the democratic way of life is at its best when objections to the way the state optimizes how to manage and contain societal risk are actively sought out, enabled, heard, and reciprocated. Even during a crisis, the government's power should not be absolute, unchecked, and without recourse. The hallmark of constitutional democracy is that even during an emergency, executive power is contingent. The people have recourse through their representatives in Parliament to check the executive. Under such extraordinary circumstances, what are the prerogatives of the legislature in holding the executive accountable within the prevailing ethical and moral framework? Top of the next page. For over 3 centuries, voting supply has been the bedrock principle of Westminster parliamentary system.
Sorry, having some issues there. I just wanted to inform you have a little less than a minute left, and you just indicated you were starting another page. So just wanted to encourage you to try to sum up.
All right.
Thank you.
The events of recent weeks appear to validate the resilience, adaptability, and vitality of Canada's constitutional system. I shall be on the last page for the translators, and I shall make my remarks quick. The Government of Canada has long taken a laissez-faire approach to departmental emergency planning, which facilitates event-driven reactions where the perceived urgency trumps the actual important. I'm concerned about overzealous experts and that want to outlaw Canadians without the intervention of certain types of behavior, without the interventions from politicians. Ottawa Mayor James Watson's intervention with regards to people actually being able to have a beer in their driveway while respecting social distancing is a good example, especially during a time of crisis. Parliament has a supreme duty to hold the executive to account. Canadians need continuous parliamentary audit of the executive and the bureaucracy's judgment. The final paragraph, and I shall end on this. During the First World War, high commands often found themselves at odds with national assemblies. Indeed, national assemblies had conceded extra powers to the executive branch and exercised restraint over the way the military prosecuted the war, assuming the war would be brief. They deferred to experts and professionals, but in the wake of a succession of failed offenses and military stagnation, parliamentarians demurred. They attempted to regain control of the war effort by injecting criticism and new ideas. Georges Clemenceau when he became Premier of France in 1917, famously surmives, war is too serious a matter to leave to soldiers. And so I think I go through a series of issues where the generals, the British generals got it wrong and Winston Churchill got it right. And so I finish with paraphrasing that military strategy requires civilian perspective, and leadership is what we learn from civil-military relations. And to paraphrase Clemenceau, that a pandemic is too important to leave to health experts or the executive alone. Hence, the importance of the role of Parliament never has been more important than today.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Monsieur Turcotte from the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada, the Director of Technology Analysis Directorate. Thank you.
Madame la Présidente.
And Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to speak before you today. You're currently examining ways to allow members of Parliament to conduct their business as well as possible during the COVID-19 pandemic. You're looking at a temporary modification of your procedure based on technological solutions to support a virtual parliament. You asked me to talk about issues of privacy protection with video conferencing as you're considering various potential solutions. Right now, all of us are operating under physical distancing, and we're adapting to that. Many of us have looked at video conference systems for both personal and professional purposes. Throughout the world, governments and parliaments are also using these effective and accessible platforms to conduct their important work. We often see a link between, on the one hand, concerns about privacy, and on the other hand, risks of attacks on cybersecurity and vulnerabilities of these platforms. Digital solutions like this are easily accessible and easy to use. That is what explains their sudden popularity. However, some have reported security concerns and issues and privacy concerns related to their use. This is because of deficiencies about the collection of data, among other things. The particular risks of this type are peculiar to each video conferencing services. Every tool has its advantages and drawbacks and its strong and weak points.
Prudent when considering cybersecurity concern or vulnerability with any particular technology option. They have also been reported that the COVID-19 crisis has created new opportunities and motivation for cyber attacks, which only increase the importance of ensuring there are adequate safeguards in place to protect against unauthorized breaches of personal information. As you consider various technological solutions to support a virtual parliament during this pandemic, it will be important to bear in mind that certain solutions may not be equally suitable for all situations. Parliament should first determine its need and then assess the technical safeguards, the potential security risk, and the privacy policies of each service before selecting a particular platform. For a situation that would involve government discussion requiring secure communication, I would defer to our government cybersecurity expert to provide specific technical expertise on appropriate solutions to support the work of Parliament. I would only add that a self-hosted web-based video conferencing system solution is generally more secure than using a web-based video conferencing system offered by a provider because there is more ability to control certain technical features and therefore to adapt it to your specific needs. If options other than self-hosted solutions are being considered, such as the numerous web-based video conferencing services that are broadly available, they should generally be reserved for public matters only. Plusieurs mesures.
Several measures enable us to protect privacy even when a system is used for public meetings. In this regard, we have formulated the following recommendations. First of all, the committee should carefully examine the confidentiality policy and the conditions of use of the service that they are considering in order to understand the way they collect, use, and communicate personal information and any agreements with third parties. When you use a private messaging service during a video conference, check whether these messages remain private or not. Some messages could be in the transcript of the meeting and be disseminated more widely than what was anticipated by their author. For public meetings of committees or the debates of the House, which would be, in your case, you would be the chair of the committee, that host, can deactivate certain functions, the screen sharing or transfer of files, in order to stop any kind of disturbance of video conferences, the intrusion of uninvited people, or other undesirable activities. Members who participate in a video conference should be careful about the environment in which they find themselves, the place where they're sitting, for example. People and objects visible in the background can reveal a lot of information. Finally, if members of Parliament use a web navigator to take part in video conferences, they should open a new window without any navigation tabs. They should also close other applications to avoid sharing notification windows, for instance, that indicate that new email is coming in, and have that shared with other participants and the video conference service provider. The Privacy Commissioner of Canada is currently preparing a list of best practices to allow individuals to mitigate common concerns concerning privacy considerations associated with web video conferences. However, these measures do not alone give you assurance that you will eliminate adequately any risks to privacy and cybersecurity, particularly in situations where you need secure communications. A safer solution will probably be necessary then. Thank you for having given me the opportunity to appear before you today, and I would now be pleased to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. We're going to start with our first round of questioning for 6 minutes with Mr. Broussard.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses for being here today. We're certainly talking about an important subject, subjects for that matter, of rural connectivity and privacy. And Mr. Turcotte, my first question is to you. And I do want to start by saying thank you for your service to our country. I know you've got an extended military career, and we appreciate that. My question is in respect to the fact that Canada is a G7 country and the issue of cybersecurity, whether it's hostile foreign power or non-state actors actually attempting to infiltrate these type of feeds through the mechanisms that we're using, like Zoom or others. How susceptible is Canada as a G7 country to the potential of a cyber attack or these non-state actors using this as a platform as Parliament sits publicly to attack or send a message, political, social, or otherwise?
Madam Chair, thank you very much for the question. First of all, in this kind of context, I think that people in our cybersecurity center in Canada would be in a better position to answer that kind of question. For instance, the CTSC could provide you with more details to answer that kind of question, the community's telecommunication security establishment. Now, in the context of a virtual parliament, it's always necessary to make up a list of one's needs and to see then what tools would be most appropriate. As I mentioned, every tool available has different functionalities, different levels of security too. And I'm sure you'd understand that zero risk does not exist from a technological standpoint. So an evaluation has to be done of acceptable risk.
Next question relates to there's been a range of organizations from, for example, the German Foreign Ministry to the United States Senate, governments of Taiwan, the New York City school system, who have refused to use Zoom. SpaceX, Elon Musk, has refused to use Zoom. What are they on to, and what are we missing as a result, Mr. Turcotte?
First of all, as I mentioned, what's very important is to make a list of needs. I'm not an expert in parliamentary procedure. Every country, every parliament has its own procedures. Now, having said that, in the framework of this COVID-19 crisis, these procedures will be amended and adjusted according to the situation, which will create new needs. Those needs will be matched to technological needs. In order to succeed in having a virtual parliament, I propose that the committee look at three components: the technological component, the human component, and the procedural component. And you bring those three things into a Venn diagram, if you will, and that will allow you to see where you have to look to make the best decisions possible. What's applicable here in Canada might not be applicable to another parliament elsewhere.
Merci, Monsieur. I also found it interesting that you mentioned that we were to carefully examine this, and yet we've been given effectively five meetings to do this. So it's almost impossible to go through all the scenarios and all the plausible problems from a security standpoint that might cause. My next question is to Ms. Kalcock. We know, for example, that only 40% of the country, rural part of our country, is covered by broadband. And I will correct something that Ms. Ashton said. Actually, the opposition House Leader Candice Bergen was at the March 24th, Manitoba MP, on the March 24th session of Parliament. But Ms. Kalcock, do you feel like your parliamentary privilege, your ability to represent your constituents is jeopardized because of the ineffectiveness of rural broadband in the part of the country in which you live? Do you find your parliamentary privilege being jeopardized?
I would say I feel that anybody in any position in the territory is at a disadvantage if their job is relies on internet services. For example, whenever you renew or get your driver's license or ID, that information needs to be sent down here to Ottawa and then get sent back into the territory because we don't have the internet capacity to process that. Right. And people wait like months. Like my mother waited for over a year to get hers.
But in your role as a member of Parliament.
Yes, I'm getting to that. Thank you. As a member of Parliament, 100%, my communications, it's mostly social media. If I want people to be able to have access to emails, to interact with my constituents and hear the much needed issues and challenges that my riding is facing, definitely internet is a huge, huge barrier for me to be able to do that and for my constituents to be able to access space and information from me in my office. Definitely.
Thank you, Ms. Kakak. That's all the time we have. Mr. Gerritsen.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And Ms. Kakak, just to follow up where Mr. Broussard left off, his question was about whether or not you felt as though your parliamentary privilege had been impugned or impacted. And you said yes, 100%. But just for the record, you have never raised a point of privilege that has been addressed by the chair or the speaker. Is that correct?
No, I have not, but we have also never been in a global pandemic.
Fair enough. I just wanted to make sure it's on the record that that's the case. Mr. Leprecht, welcome back. For those that don't know, Mr. Leprecht was one of my teachers at one of my profs at Queen's University, and the only prof to ever not grant me an extension on an essay when I asked for it. So if he's a little tough on me today, you'll know why. But you made a really interesting point, which was you said you're more concerned about how we use technology. And a really interesting analogy for this is when we had our first virtual session of Parliament yesterday, at the beginning of the meeting, my Zoom program had 13 pages of thumbnail photos, of which only one page had people had muted their video. By about 20 minutes into it, that number had grown to 5 or 6 pages of people who had turned off their video. What do you recommend in terms of establishing certain guidelines or best practices to make sure that people are using technology and participating properly? Because I think it opens the door to potential problems, which I think is what you were getting at.
Look, I think this is an opportunity for all parliamentarians to realize that those of us who's worked on cyber for years have been trying to push with members in Ottawa that cyber is not just one other policy domain among a series of others, that cyber touches every aspect of our lives today, and that fundamentally we need to have a conversation about that in a democracy, technology, that human beings should not be at the service of technology. Technology needs to be at the service of human beings. And the fact, the issues that you just laid out demonstrate to us that we haven't thought systematically enough at the micro, meso, and macro level about how we make sure in Canada and democracy that is the case.
Do you think it's necessary to establish certain guidelines and principles of engagement because we should assume that they're going to be different than what happens in person?
We are building the plane while flying it, and ideally, especially, we want to be prepared for these types of eventualities. And we should be having this conversation, but of course, it is suboptimal to try to figure out what those procedures look like as we're trying to navigate the crisis and the emergency. And so this means that we need to have a much broader conversation about the continuity of constitutional governance so that we can be much better prepared. But I think, yes, you're absolutely right, that we need proper procedures and we need to learn from the necessity to have a much more robust posture as a government and as Parliament to be able to weather these types of storms.
Okay. Ms. Bernier, you had talked, and I think a couple of you had talked about the fact that you're not concerned about security as it relates to public meetings, because basically we should be encouraging people to get involved in the democratic process, if anything. So therefore, there shouldn't be a concern as to whether or not, the security around it. But Mr. Broussard touched on something in what he said, and I'll pick up on that, which is that I don't think the security aspect is just about how people, it's not just about in camera versus public. It can also be about people taking hostage of a meeting. So say, for example, you had a very, very important public meeting that was going to take place and a hacker got in and crashed the system and Parliament couldn't function properly as a result of that. Would you agree that that is equally as concerning, or maybe not equally, but that's something that should be of concern as well?
And indeed, there have been media reports about that.
Yeah.
So we definitely need to contend with that. But perhaps the best way to explain my approach is to explain to you how I come to it. So I have spent 27 years as a senior public servant, and therefore, including at the highest levels. Therefore, I have been able to assess the remarkable quality of cybersecurity in government, which is why I'm quite confident that you do have the instruments and the expertise that you need.
Okay.
The point is to apply it in a segmented way, which means protecting information that must be protected and protecting meetings that must be protected. So obviously, a cabinet meeting and a debate in the House of Commons do not call for the same cybersecurity measures.
Okay, I understand that better. Thank you. And to both of my NDP colleagues who are joining us today, the issue of internet connectivity is coming up. I mean, this committee is tasked with looking at virtual parliament right now. And one of the issues that we need to look at is internet connectivity, obviously, but not for entire regions, but rather to make sure that every MP has the same access to internet. So would it be safe to say, in terms of that context, maybe Ms. Ashton, if you want to pick up on this, that providing that all MPs have the same access, it would be fair. You know, it might cost more, but it also costs a lot more for you to travel to Ottawa than it does for me, because I'm only a 2-hour drive away. Is the issue here making sure that everybody has the same level of access? And if that can be provided by, for example, satellite internet, then we would accomplish having the same access. For the purpose of virtual parliament.
Mr. Gerritsen, I allowed you to get your question in, but perhaps our witnesses can answer it at another time, perhaps fit it in somewhere else. Next, we have Madame, and I want to find out the correct pronunciation because I know this was an issue yesterday in the COVID-19 committee meeting. It's Mademoiselle Normandin, because it wasn't Day, right? Normandin.
Je vous entendais en même temps que j'entendais la traduction, mais vous l'aviez bien.
I'm sorry, I was listening to both the interpretation and the language, but yes, you did pronounce it properly. Now, I have a question that can go out to all the panelists. Currently, we're discussing a virtual parliament, but I'd like to go off on a tangent a little. In terms of accountability, one important tool, especially for the opposition, is to be able to hold caucus meetings, rather, and to be able to have private discussions. Sometimes where we're in meetings, there can be blocked zones for security issues. Do you think perhaps this has been abandoned somewhat because of the virtual parliament discussions? And do you think we need more support from Parliament, especially for opposition parties, to ensure that we can have confidential exchanges within caucuses, because not all parties work with the same platforms? Inaudible for the interpreter.
Go ahead.
Who is the question for, Ms. Normandin? Excuse me? Who is the question for, Ms. Normandin? Well, as I said earlier, it's for all the panelists, so whoever can answer can go ahead. This affects many issues: accountability, security, privacy, so you would all have something to say, probably.
Can we have Madame Bernier first and then Ms. Ash?
Ms. Bernier.
We'll carry from.
Alors, voilà.
Thank you, Ms. Normandin. You're giving a perfectly good example of the segments that I was referring to earlier on. And Mr. Turcotte also referred to this. All information doesn't necessarily have to be protected. And what will be necessary is that within each of these segments, you have to make that decision. If you're talking about protected information, where you want those debates to be private, then you are going to have to consult with the experts, the cybersecurity experts, the government experts, on the level of security that you require. And that will depend on the level of confidentiality within that debate.
Ms. Ashton.
Oui, merci pour la.
Thank you for the question. I was going to say that I think we all agree that the parliamentary technicians help us accomplish this virtual work, and they're doing their best. But obviously, there are things that we're learning. And we're going to have to focus on some of these issues more and more, including information security within our caucus meetings. It would be a good idea to have more support. In fact, yesterday, I tried to organize a meeting amongst colleagues on Zoom. And I saw how rigid the system was. I think it would be also very important to learn from other jurisdictions that are doing this virtual work and have been doing it for some time. It would be good to look at what they're doing. We need to be able to be flexible. We need to be able to learn from others. And we need to be able to do the best we can and learn how to do that. We need to ensure that the public work of Parliament is done as quickly as possible.
J'aimerais bien entendre
Monsieur Leprichet, is that the correct pronunciation of your name? Because former student called it, pronounced it another way.
Leprecht, but no worries. It's perfectly fine. Deux remarques, madame.
So I would have two comments.
There's always a trade-off between convenience and security. And the more security you want, the more it is going to be inconvenient for people to engage at that level. And so it is unlikely that we will be able to, I think, convince parliamentarians to engage in the sort of behavior that, for instance, our defense members and our members of the intelligence community engage in for the purpose of protecting their communications. It is also a function of the networks, that we simply do not have the secure networks in terms of, for instance, level 2 exposed routers and purpose-built networks for the intelligence defense community for parliamentarians. And so I think the challenge with a virtual parliament is that there will be insecurity when caucus meets, and caucus will have to meet on the assumption that the information in caucus is compromised. Because with the conditions that we have, there is no assurance. We cannot provide assurance that it is not. And this is part of the challenge of holding a virtual parliament. And I see no way, at least in the short term, of building out a secure network and changing the behavior of parliamentarians to the point where we can provide the level of assurance that the secure components of government have today with regards to the data protection that would be necessary for that assurance in caucus meetings.
Okay, thank you. That's all the time we have. Ms. Blaney, please.
Well, thank you to all of the presenters today. I appreciated that information. And I think my first question, I would like to go to Ms. Bernier and Mr. Turcotte. You know, one of the challenges as we look at a virtual parliament is making sure that we're following the appropriate personal information protection acts. And we know that forum section clauses are pretty standard in online service contracts, but we do have a legal precedent from the Supreme Court of Canada that BC's privacy laws, and I'm a member of Parliament from BC, merit waiving forum selection clauses because they're much more stringent than other areas. So if issues arise in an online House of Commons sitting, what laws do you think would apply to the case?
The Privacy Act, but then there is a legal void in relation to the political parties, you see? Mm-hmm. So the Privacy Act applies to all federal institutions, but the information held by political parties is not covered by the Privacy Act. Let's therefore put your scenario in a situation where personal information would be discussed or shared in, let's say, in a confidential debate, because it would never be shared in a public debate unless the information is no longer protected, because, for example, it is already in the public domain. So if it is exchanged in a confidential debate, it must be protected to that level of sensitivity that personal information requires. And should there be, let's say, an accidental disclosure, it would be the Privacy Act that would govern the consequences. So the obligations applicable would most likely be the Privacy Act.
Okay, thank you. So my other question is for my fellow MP Mumalak. Thank you so much for being here. I know that you had to make a very hard decision to stay in Ottawa to really be part of protecting your own community back home. But you also made it very clear that even if you were sitting in your constituency office in your riding, you are not sure that you would be able to access any committees or any virtual parliament. So I just want to clarify that that is in fact the case.
Definitely. And with my riding being the largest, I have 25 isolated communities. So the capital, Iqaluit, has more services, might be a little bit more accessible, but my hometown, Baker Lake, I couldn't confidently say, and even in Iqaluit, there's nowhere in the territory, as of right now, I could confidently say I would be able to participate in virtual parliament.
Thank you so much. That's very helpful. And, you know, I think as we discuss this, one of the issues is a parliamentarian in this circumstance should be able to provide or participate in their office, but also in their home. Ms. Ashton, Nikki, thank you again for being here today. One of the things you talked about was the need to have good regional representation, especially in a situation like this. I know I'm from a more rural and remote community. The challenges that I'm faced with are very particular to my region. And if that voice isn't heard long-term in Ottawa, I would be very concerned. If you could just talk about the need to have that regional exposure.
Absolutely. I mean, there's an irony in that, you know, it's regions like ours that have some of the most vulnerable communities in the country, and also some of the worst access to internet and the ability to, you know, for people to live their daily lives, whether it's telehealth, whether it's accessing government services, whether it's right now during the crisis, you know, kids doing their schoolwork, and whether it's our work as members of parliament. And you know, I think it's, you know, we have to ensure that much like we do in normal times, that there is fair regional representation. You know, we do that in terms of our budgets. We do that in terms of, I mean, within our parties. But let's be clear that in this time of crisis, it's critical that that we see the virtual parliament as the only way that we can ensure a regional access. And if I can just one moment respond to the earlier comment by a Liberal colleague, you know, that, you know, here we are asking about internet for everybody. I mean, I am proud to talk about the desperate need for equal access to internet for everybody. And to be honest, I think it's very elitist that we as members of parliament just talk about what we as individuals need, when in fact, you know, the barriers that we face is a reflection of the barriers that our constituents, our neighbors, our families face here in our regions. I don't think it's out of the ordinary at all, or out of the realm of possibility at all for a country as wealthy as Canada to invest the infrastructure needed now for there to be equal access to internet for all. You know, and our this crisis is a wake-up call, and you know, let's step up in this moment in time, and you know, make this possible for everybody, and including MPs.
Okay, thank you. That's all the time we have. For the next round, it's the 5-minute round. We're going to try, we have very little time, try to get through the 5-minute round. Mr. Tucker, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for all the presenters. Real quickly to Mrs. Bernay. if I heard you correctly, you would be comfortable having an in-camera session right now with the current technology that we are utilizing in Canada?
I would urge you to get a guarantee from the IT experts of the House of Commons that proceeding virtually in camera is secure.
Would you have the same, would you say that confidence has grown probably? It's fair to say like 2 years ago, you wouldn't be as comfortable, but as technology improves, you would be more comfortable?
You're quite correct, because through experience, we see the risks and therefore develop more and more safeguards.
Thank you. Mr. Lubrecht, I got a couple of questions for you, and this has been really eye-opening. The more we talk about this, the more I have real concerns about what this could possibly do for our democracy and our stature in the world. Things are changing. The next, the frontiers that we, what we face and bad actors around the world in the past, the front lines are a lot different than today. And is it fair to say that cyber security or cyber attacks or cyber influence of bad actors in our elections or our economy or you name it is the next frontier? Is that a fair statement, that that's where we should be watching for?
If I may, I would encourage the member to read the report by the Solarium Commission that was released by the Bipartisan U.S. Congressional Commission in February, which is very thorough on all the challenges that the cyber domain poses for democracy. And while we're having very technical conversations about whether caucus is secure and whether our conversations are secure, think about the adversarial intent. And it is relatively straightforward. One is to sow discord in our democratic societies by polarizing conversations. The other is to show that democracy is chaotic and dysfunctional in order to hold up authoritarian systems. And so in a virtual parliament, we also have the opportunity to demonstrate that democracy does function and is resilient in times of crisis, in times of emergency, because people in Russia and China can stream the parliament as much as we can in Canada. And I think we need to be much more broadly aware of the broader objectives of our adversary over the tactical sort of dimensions of can the adversary extract particular aspects of data, because the adversary every day is trying to discredit democracy and sow discord.
So of those bad actors, I can only imagine hearing, be it government or opposition, probably government is where the juiciest of the details that they could hear what was being considered or some of the debate within caucus maybe. That if the federal government had virtual caucus meetings, and I'm assuming they do, would that be one of the more juicier things for a bad actor in the world to learn? And they could either use it for economic reasons or some of the destabilizing points that you made. Would that be the most juicy or one of the juicier ways of them hacking into our parliament?
It is one of the concerns about data being routed through servers in adversarial countries, that it opens up that data to greater vulnerability, for instance. So the technology, the data assurance component, but really it is about being able to discredit Parliament, the political executive, and the way we function. And so I actually think demonstrating, with some reservations about what is discussed, the ability to continue to meet as a parliament sends the strong message that I think we have not sent sufficiently enough, which is that democracies are actually more resilient than authoritarian systems. What is our answer to these adversarial actors to convince both the adversarial actors and Canadians that democracy is where they should be placing their faith, rather than authoritarian answers? And Parliament is the answer to that question.
And along those lines, as technology changes, and this is why I asked Ms. Murray if she 2 years ago she would feel comfortable making the same statement today. As technology improves, so will the other bad actors in the world. things are never static. So they're going to find new and unfortunate ways. If you think of the last 10 years, bad actors have influenced, or could say influenced other world elections with emails, and how safe we all thought that emails, depending on the server and all that comes with that, it'll be the next step. And there's additional steps we can do to make it secure, but similar to anyone that builds a fence to keep people out, people will just find taller ladders to climb the fence. So
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. I wanted to allow you time to finish your thought, and I have been trying to allow you to finish, but can you wrap it up? Was that all?
Just generally, how if you were looking at for technology to be the solution out there, along the lines of how long would it take to develop something? You talked about having separate servers and separate dedicated lines for parliamentarians. Are we talking 2 weeks? Are we talking 2 months? Or are we talking 2 years to get it somewhere that you would be comfortable?
So that's all the time we have. Maybe we can get that answer at another time, but I think Mr. Luprick was able to hear your question at least. Next, we have Madame Petitpas-Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to take the opportunity as well to thank our witnesses for being with us this evening. It's always great to receive your feedback and your insight regarding this very important topic that we're studying. As we all know, Canadians, and including parliamentarians, are really trying hard to follow public health measures by staying home and working remotely. As we've heard this evening, many of us are using different platforms and different tools, and it's been quite successful for the most part. But we are also hearing concerns of cybersecurity. And I know on a daily basis, we hear the words of threats and vulnerabilities, and we've heard that many times this evening. My question would be for probably Madame Bernier and perhaps Monsieur Turcotte. I guess my question to you is, what questions do you think that we need to ask ourselves to ensure that we're respecting privacy concerns and security concerns in the virtual meeting part of it, but also, Madame Bernier, you had spoke about working remotely, and that really piqued my curiosity there. I'm wondering if you would be able to elaborate a bit on that as well as what we should be doing.
Absolutely.
And asking ourselves.
Exactly. And as you have heard me say, I encourage you, first of all, to have a conversation with your staff. What are they, each of them, doing to ensure that they protect information security in the context of their home? And there are very specific ways to protect it. I gave you some. They are based on the major risks that we have seen through years of seeing issues. We've seen laptops lost. We have seen files left on a bus. And I'm speaking of what I've seen in my 5.5 years at the Office of Privacy Commissioner of Canada, and now 5.5 years as external counsel. I can tell you there is a lot of very good practical literature out there that really states these are the risks on the basis of what we've seen most often, and these are the ways to mitigate the risk. So I would encourage you to look at that very helpful literature.
Merci. I don't know if Monsieur Turcotte wanted. Oh.
So I'm going to echo what Madame Bernier just mentioned, but also from a technological point of view, it is important, I think, that most of the system, if they are hosted or self-hosted or in-house within the own organization, that's going to increase. It doesn't mean that it's going to be necessarily perfect, but at least it's going to increase the security aspect of it as you have full control of it in terms of infrastructure. So that's one part. The other part in terms of mitigation, it was mentioned also previously, guidelines and procedure needs to be adapted. So cybersecurity is not necessarily just technology. It can be caused by humans. So proper guidelines and procedure in place also is going to help. People need to be, they need to understand their environment. So that's going to come with time and practice, different settings and different functions that are available within different tools that you are going to use are also different type of measure or safeguards in place.
Thank you. And perhaps my last question, how would you suggest that we stay current on the cyber threat landscape, like what we're facing right now? Perhaps Madame Bernier, Monsieur Turcotte, and also Monsieur Christian?
So the challenge is an every day, almost every minute one. Ian Kerr, a professor at the University of Ottawa, who sadly passed away last summer, who was truly a great thinker on these subjects, used to say, when the technology is current, it is already out of date. So I smiled when I heard your question because you're referring to my everyday challenge, because I constantly have to learn because it's changing so fast. So I would tell you there is a shortcut, and the shortcut is to make sure that you have cybersecurity experts at the ready and that you have the right questions. So what you have is a good framework of what your risks are. And if you know that, then you may not have the answers, but you have the right questions. And you put it to them, and they will, as Monsieur Turcotte was saying earlier on, align the safeguards to the risks that you have identified.
Okay, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much. Next up for questioning is Mr. Duncan. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Couple of questions that I have for maybe as a bit of a background. Ms. Kakak, at our committee meeting last week, I can relate to you about internet connectivity, probably not on the same scale as what you have and the challenges you have in Nunavut, but I was on a passionate rant to my colleagues, and I felt like I had their support about halfway through, and all of a sudden I cut off and had to reconvene right in the middle of the House of Commons committee. But one of the questions I have about connectivity, and we talk about procedures and that, maybe Ms. Ashton can speak about that as well, is I think it's important for us to understand time frame, not necessarily just for ourselves as members that may have challenges, but provincial colleagues that may be in similar, or municipal elected officials in some of those essential services. A fix of this, of having quality internet access in your riding accessible to you, this is not something that's going to take a couple of weeks to fix. We lack a lot of infrastructure. Can you maybe give some details in your community just about how far we really need to go to get that parity, if it's yourself individually or members of your community in your hometown?
Yeah, thank you for that. And to kind of go back to what Ms. Ashton was saying, this is all so connected and intertwined with everything else. So the hydrofiber link that I had mentioned, it's also an opportunity to have a road that goes from Manitoba into the territory to a select number of communities. They're looking at similar projects over in the west in the Khatimi region. And in order for us to start talking about other options, we also need to be talking about things like housing, things like infrastructure, things like accessibility to transportation. All of these things are impacted by the lack of services, and we need them in order to really increase the services, really make an investment, really make a push, really see change for the opportunity for connectivity.
In timeline-wise, you would say realistically, if we had these plans tomorrow and dollars announced tomorrow, it would be months, if not maybe years, to get those communities physically connected with the fiber and what's needed.
I would argue that. I think we move as fast as the federal government allows us to. We saw, for example, when the early district warning system was put in place, the dew line sites across the north, it took, I think it was less than 2 years. It was around 2 years. So when we hear housing's going to take years and years and years, that's not true. It's only because we don't have the funding, we don't have the services, we're not treated as a priority as a peoples. So I think that's, you definitely have a fair point, though. We hear it takes a lot of time. Realistically, it doesn't need to, but this is where we're at.
Ms. Ashton?
Yes, thank you for your question, and just I guess also reiterating some of what my colleague just said, Ms. Kakak. I think what's needed here is political will. We've seen some unprecedented investment from the federal government in recent weeks to deal with the crisis that we have in front of us right now. And as I pointed out in my presentation, this crisis has shed a very bright and unflattering light on the digital divide that we have. And so, and this is deeply linked to access to healthcare services, access to government services, access to fundamental education. And so, we can do this. We have the ability to do this. I appreciate your point that we're not the only representatives that are in the same bind. 3 of my provincial colleagues are also live north of the travel restriction here and should not be traveling to the south if it can be avoided to attend the Legislative Assembly. And so, I think it's again, though, this is a question of access to an essential service, not just for us as MPs, but also very importantly for the citizens that we represent.
Agreed. In healthcare, education, the list goes on, as you both have mentioned. Thank you for your comments. Dr. Luprecht, we met before through the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus, and you've done a great report on policing sustainability. My first question I want to amend was maybe ask you what you gave Mr. Gerritsen in the class that you had with him, but I'll pass on that, is maybe to build up on your comments about the parliamentary aspect. And I respect what you say about, and you note about how Parliament is open, it's transparent, it's on TV in terms of the security risks there. My concern goes more, and Madame Normandin in the block had talked about the caucus aspects and some of those in-camera, behind the scenes that are an essential part of seeing that public face of Parliament, that I worry about some of those security aspects. And I liked your line about building the plane while flying it and agreeing that technology may not be the challenge as much as it is the human dynamic. But would you respectfully agree that as we've been doing, we have Zoom, for an example, we've been rolling these processes out. Do you not think that might be a human issue or not a best practice at times? Yes, we want to get here quickly, but when you talk about the protocols, connectivity, devices, those questions you want to ask in a contract you would have with a company, do you not agree that perhaps as humans right now, as we're rushing to do this, that this may not be the best or best steps, or maybe a higher risk of having these challenges of hacking or accessing our software outside of these programs?
That's all the time we have. I'm so sorry. But at least you got your question on the record, and that was a little bit over time, but I don't like to cut off on mid-sentence. Next up, we have Mr. Algabra, and this is the last questioner for the 5-minute round, and then we will switch panels.
Okay. Can you hear me? Let me put on my headset. Hear me, Madam Chair. Hello, can you hear me? Okay, great. Sorry about this mishap. So it was. I was listening to our experts today, and I want to thank them all for being with us. Look, I'm hearing obviously a lot of important questions, whether it is the accessibility to high-speed internet, whether it is the privacy concern. So, and those are important public policy issues. What we're dealing with today is an exceptional and this phrase that has been repeatedly used, unprecedented situation, where we've asked that our economy, almost 25% of our economy has been shut down. Millions of Canadians have been asked to stay away from their jobs and stay at home. So obviously, those are extremely exceptional circumstances, and we are asking for sacrifices. So I think the challenge that this committee is tasked with is, given this context that we're in, given that we're, if I think in theory, if you asked anybody that tomorrow we would shut down a quarter of our economy, nobody would have said that's a smart thing to do, or that's a reasonable thing to do. But we are doing it for public health reasons and following the advice of public health officials. Given the situation that we're dealing with, we know that it's not an ideal situation. What areas or what questions should we be focusing on, given the fact that we must find at least some form of virtuality for our parliament? Go ahead.
Who's the question for?
Go ahead, Mr. Luprecht.
I would say Parliament needs to prepare for whether this is a blizzard or whether we are facing a snowstorm. And especially if we're in a prolonged snowstorm, it will require a very active engagement from Parliament with the political executive. We also need to become much better at anticipating low probability, high impact events. And part of the reason why we haven't been able to do that is because we haven't had an adequate strategic assessment capability within the government of Canada for almost 30 years. These types of what you might call black swans, even though this is not one of them, I think necessitate us to have a much more robust foresight capacity of anticipating the challenges that we face and what the best arrangements are in a democracy. What should a state handle? What should the private sector, for instance, handle? Because I think we can't go through this again in terms of the amounts of money that we are currently paying out.
If I may, I would like to answer this question by reframing it. I think it's very important that you frame the challenge properly. It is not a privacy challenge. It is a cybersecurity challenge, which is why, for example, earlier on, I heard Monsieur Turcotte refer you to the communications security establishment. You hardly ever share personal information. Privacy applies only to personal information. The broad challenge you have is one of cybersecurity, and therefore, like Monsieur Turcotte earlier on, I encourage you to seek the advice of the communication security establishment official.
But Ms. Bernier, you earlier said that we should ask 100% guarantee from our IT officials, or you and I know I think it's almost impossible. So what do you propose we should be asking for?
So first of all, you may have noticed I did not use 100%. I said guarantee.
Oh, well,
okay. 100%.
Okay, sorry, those are my words, but it's the same point.
As a lawyer, I would never say 100%.
I stand corrected.
That being said, my point is that to frame the challenge properly, meaning to frame it as a cybersecurity challenge, then you will bring to the debate or to the discussion the information that is truly relevant and that is truly of your security experts in government.
Okay. Thank you. I'd like to thank all the witnesses for this first panel of today's meeting. You're all fantastic, and thank you for taking time out to contribute to our study. We've all learned a lot, and now we will suspend to get set up for the next panel for 5 minutes. If everyone can be back at 6:50, exactly 6:50. If you can even get on the line a minute before, that would be good. We'll stay on the line if you're already on the line. You can turn off your cameras if you may. for time.
Agreed.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Welcome back. We're going to get started. So can everyone click on their screen in the top right-hand corner to ensure that they are on gallery view? With this view, you should be able to see all participants in a grid view. For those of you who are just joining us, before speaking, please wait until you're recognized by name. When you are ready to speak, you can either click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, or you can hold down the space bar of your computer while you are speaking. When you release the bar, your mic will mute itself, just like a walkie-talkie. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. The use of the headset is strongly encouraged. And I would like to now welcome our second panel of witnesses. We would like to hear introductory statements, first from Christine de Clarency, the Associate Professor, Department of Political Science from the University of Western.
Good evening, Madam Speaker and committee members. I had intended to speak a bit in French, but I think given the time and the technical issues, I will just continue in English for the translator's ease. Thank you for your invitation. I understand in this panel session, the committee is focusing on possible video conferencing platforms and their feasibility as it relates to establishing a virtual parliament. In terms of the feasibility of the technology, I expect others on this panel will discuss virtual and interactive teleconferencing in light of the capacities of different mediated platforms, albeit with some inherent limitations, security considerations, and the risk of malfunction. In terms of the feasibility of the House's capacity to amend its internal rules to facilitate members' virtual presence in lieu of their physical presence, it is clear this can be achieved constitutionally, from J.G. Borno writing in 1901 to David E. Smith writing in 2017. In our system, legislative bodies alone are the masters of their proceedings. As someone who studies government in Canada, my interpretation of feasibility today revolves around what sort of costs and benefits the adoption of virtual legislative meetings imply for democracy within Canada and beyond the walls of the House of Commons. So I engage this question: is virtual assembly democratically feasible? Below are 5 points that may be helpful to you in your deliberations. First, technology is intrinsically disruptive. The first taxi drivers to use cell phones to plot their courses could not imagine how this technology would alter their industry within a very short time. Plus, the law of unintended consequences warns us that intervention in complex systems tends to produce unanticipated consequences. Taken together, technology plus systemic intervention equals deep change, marked by unpredictable outcomes. We cannot know the consequences of such change, but they will not all be positive for our democracy. Second, the Canadian Parliament is unique. It is sui generis. We have a complex, diverse, finely balanced political system. In the rush to address the pandemic, it is tempting to examine how other parliamentary systems are moving towards virtual sessions. But it is a profound mistake to simply assume what works in other systems necessarily will work the same here. Because technology is disruptive, we need to carefully study technological adoptions and adaptations before asserting that we can estimate the effects of such change. In the history of legislatures to this point, no advanced democratic legislature deliberates and votes virtually as a method of normal business. Especially because of our complexity, Canada should not be among the first to do so. Third, the state of democracy in Canada is not static. It has changed and evolved and continues to do so. It is dynamic and responsive to the factors and pressures that bear upon it. This is to say that change can diminish it as well as enhance it. Indeed, the quality of democracy can be easily damaged and insulted, as we have seen recently in some of the world's leading democracies. any diminution in the legislature's task of holding the executive to account or the media's key role lessens democracy. 4, considering a move to a virtual House of Commons sessions and committee meetings uncovers many complex issues. Of these, one of the more perturbing concerns the deliberative function. As Valère Gaspard and I have written elsewhere, quote, the opportunities for formal and informal exchanges during debate, in committee work, and at work-related social activities provide crucial interactions among the members. These interactions allow MPs to be exposed to different ideas and perspectives. Such encounters are a key part of our democratic politics. By reducing parliamentary debate, interaction, and exchange to the click of a button, we risk losing what makes our democracy work. Smith observes, deliberation is more than an aggregation of individual constituency demands. One of the challenges in the move to virtual assembly is to ensure e-deliberation is more than just an episodic, half-hearted online opinion poll. 5. Other witnesses have commented on the importance of member privilege, so I will not repeat that information here. I find it difficult to accept, at this point, virtual sittings and sessions can fully facilitate all the aspects of privilege that members enjoy when meeting in normal conditions. In particular, I expect that the privileges around political speech will be difficult to ensure and safeguard in a virtual context. The capacity of members of the House of Commons to dissent, to express dissent, such as voting against their party leadership, absenting themselves from controversial debates, challenging a ruling of the Speaker, or even being removed from the House, to have that dissent understood and to be sanctioned in known ways in accordance with the legislature's rules and the rule of law are fundamental to democracy. All manifestations of dissent demonstrate that democracy is present. It's not at all clear to me how one dissents effectively in a virtual session when those who are not speaking are literally muted. And if dissent is not present and not demonstrated, then is the legislature really free? These 5 points illustrate some of the costs to consider in moving to some form of a virtual assembly. Against these costs is stacked a weighty benefit, minimizing the risk of infection for MPs, staff, security, administrators, technicians, and all of the families. The benefit of good health is inarguable. Therefore, the committee may well decide that meeting virtually is the best among few viable options. In this case, my view is that virtual meetings should be held very sparingly, and with the understanding these are short-term measures taken during an extraordinary period. Certainly going forward, there's merit to ensuring that the House can meet virtually as a default or a backup option for future crises, and much more careful research should be undertaken as to how best to effect this. Creating this sort of institutional infrastructure will require a large, careful effort to fully understand the implications of such change. This period of crisis, in other words, should not serve as an accidental gateway to bringing in a permanent method of virtual assembly that is not well understood and which carries large democratic implications for Canada. Is virtual assembly democratically feasible? Perhaps, but in small doses and with the intention to return to normalcy as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, can we have Professor Diebert from the University of Toronto and Director of Citizen Lab, Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee members. I'm glad to be here. As was mentioned, I'm director of the Citizen Lab. The Citizen Lab does research on digital security issues that arise out of human rights concerns. As much as of the world moves into work from home rules and self-isolation, technology has become an essential lifeline. However, the sudden dependence on remote networking has opened up a whole new assortment of security and privacy risks. In light of these sudden shifts in practices, it's essential that the tools relied on for especially sensitive and high-risk communications be subjected to careful scrutiny. In my comments, I'm going to first quickly summarize Citizen Lab's recent investigation into the security of Zoom's video conferencing application, the application we're using right now, and the company's responses to our published reports. And then I'll discuss a broader range of digital security risks that are relevant to the work from home routines that MPs and their staff are following. And I conclude with 6 recommendations. So first, with respect to our report published on Zoom, we published it on April 3rd and did a follow-up on April 8th. In essence, at the core of that report was that we found that Zoom did not seem to have been well designed or effectively implemented in terms of its encryption. Its public documentation made several misleading claims about its encryption protocols that did not match what we observed in our analysis, and I invite committee members to take a look at that report. We also found potential security issues with how Zoom generates and stores cryptographic information. While based in Silicon Valley, Zoom owns 3 companies in China where its engineers develop the Zoom software. And in some of our tests, our researchers observed encryption keys being distributed through Zoom servers in China, even when all meeting participants were outside of China. A company catering primarily to North American clients that distributes encryption keys in this way is obviously very concerning, because Zoom may be legally obligated to disclose those keys to authorities in China. In our report published on April 3rd, we also discovered that there were issues with Zoom's waiting room feature. We didn't disclose those at the time because we consider them very serious. We did a responsible disclosure to the company. Now, in response to both of these reports, Zoom has taken a number of actions regarding security. It's committed to a 90-day process to identify and fix security issues, including a third-party security review, enhancing their bug bounty program, and preparing a transparency report. They've also committed to improving their encryption, including working towards the implementation of end-to-end encryption. They acknowledge that some Zoom users based out of China would have connected to data centers within China, and indicated that they had immediately put in place measures to prevent that from happening. They've released new versions of their platform, and you can see there are some new features like we experienced today with waiting rooms and passwords and so forth. And they've done a very good job in terms of hiring people with credible expertise in the cybersecurity area. While it's encouraging that Zoom has made these improvements, the sudden reliance by a very large number of people on a platform that was never designed for highly sensitive communications is symptomatic of a much larger set of problems related to work from home routines. It's imperative that we evaluate all the risks associated with this sudden change in routines, and not just those associated with one particular application. Legislators working from home are connecting using devices, accounts, and applications through widely differing home network setups, as are their staff. These networks may be shared with roommates and family members whose own digital security practices may vary widely. Whereas in pre-COVID times, these devices were routinely brought back into the government's security perimeter, where sensors might detect problematic network behavior. This is obviously no longer the case. Generally speaking, the communication systems that we rely on have rarely been designed with security in mind. Security is either routinely regarded as slowing the speed of innovation or impossible to patch backwards. And so the consequence is that there is a vast array of unpatched systems that leave persistent vulnerabilities for malicious actors to exploit. Meanwhile, governments and criminal enterprises have dramatically increased their capabilities to exploit this ecosystem for a variety of purposes. Almost all nation states have at least some cyber espionage capabilities. There is also a poorly regulated private market for cybersecurity that includes numerous companies that provide off-the-shelf targeted espionage and mass surveillance services. Our own research at Citizen Lab has shown that the market for commercial spyware in particular is prone to abuse, and including being linked to targeted killings and the targeting of a Canadian permanent resident. These relationships may well open the door to the same tools being deployed against legislators and their staff in jurisdictions like Canada. At the best of times, these problems present extraordinary challenges for network defenders, but now parliamentarians and their staff are at even greater risk, and threat actors are capitalizing on this new environment. So in terms of recommendations, I make 6, and I'll just go through these very quickly. Where possible, extend digital security resources developed for the House of Commons to all Canadians. I think the IT team at the House of Commons will be severely taxed dealing with all of the problems that I'm describing here. And some measures have been taken already. CSE is helping out. There are ways in which the measures that CSE is undertaking to push threat indicators out to some organizations outside of the government perimeter could be done more widely, but I would urge that they be done in a transparent and accountable way. Second recommendation is that the Government of Canada should evaluate and issue guidance on work from home best practices, including those for video conferencing applications. This should include recommendations on scenarios for use of some applications for specific purposes, but not others. And I assume we'll get into that in the Q&A. Some of that has been done already by the Cyber Center, but these are dated and largely insufficient to the tasks at hand. Third recommendation, support independent research on digital security and the promotion of secure communication tools. At a time when obviously we're depending on technological systems, there should be more high quality, independent research that scrutinizes these systems for privacy and security risks to assure Canadians that the networks upon which they depend are secure. Researchers must have the ability to dig beneath the surface of those systems, including into proprietary algorithms, without fear of reprisal. Presently, researchers can come under legal threat when they conduct this type of research to the detriment of everyone's security. So we recommend that the Government of Canada pass legislation which explicitly recognizes a public interest right to engage in security research of this sort. Recommendation number 4, implement a vulnerability disclosure process for government agencies, including the House of Commons. These processes establish terms by which researchers can communicate the presence of vulnerabilities in organization systems or networks without fearing legal repercussions. I believe Canada should do this as well to mitigate vulnerabilities and making it comfortable for researchers to engage in this type of adversarial research. Recommendation 5, establish a transparent and accountable vulnerabilities equities process. So the Communications Security Establishment currently has a process by which it evaluates whether to conceal the presence of computer software vulnerabilities for use in its own intelligence operations, or to disclose them to ensure that all devices are made secure. However, CSE is formally alone in making decisions over whether to retain or disclose a vulnerability. So we recommend that the Government of Canada broaden the stakeholder institutions who adjudicate whether vulnerabilities are retained or disclosed, especially in light of the enhanced risk that all government workers are at given their work from home situation. We also recommend that the Government of Canada follow international best practices and release a full vulnerabilities equities process policy so that residents of Canada can rest assured that CSE and its government will not retain vulnerabilities that could seriously compromise the security of all Canadians. And the last recommendation is to support strong encryption. Given the potential for adversaries to take advantage of poorly secured devices and systems, we recommend that the Government of Canada support the availability of strong encryption so that MPs, their staffs, and residents of Canada can be assured that the government is not secretly weakening this life-saving and commerce-enabling technology to the detriment of all Canadians and our allies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Next up, we have the Translation Bureau. We have Mr. Ball, and we have Ms. Lelebert. Is only one of you going to give an opening statement?
Yes, I will do it, Madam Chair.
Okay. Can you pronounce your name for me, please?
Nathalie Laliberté.
Laliberté. Okay.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, good evening. My name is Nathalie Laliberté, and I am Vice President, Services to Parliament and Interpretation at the Translation Bureau, Public Services and Procurement Canada. With me today is my colleague, Matthew Ball, Director of Interpretation and Chief Interpreter. I would like to thank you for this invitation to participate in your work concerning virtual sittings of Parliament. The Translation Bureau is mandated to provide linguistic services for these sittings, and we are happy to share our views with the committee. I would like to specify, however, that our services do not cover technical support during the sittings. As you know, under the Translation Bureau Act, we are responsible for providing services to both Houses of Parliament and to federal departments and agencies in all matters related to the making and revising of translations from one language into another of documents and to terminology and interpretation. We provide high-quality linguistic services in the 2 official languages, Indigenous and foreign languages, and sign languages. The Translation Bureau plays a vital role in implementing the Official Languages Act. This role makes the Bureau a key player in communications with the public, the language of work in the public service, and the advancement of English and French in Canadian society. Since 2017, we have developed a clear vision to guide our future as a centre of excellence in linguistic services for the Government of Canada. And we have been following through on our plan. For example, we launched major initiatives to increase quality control, modernize our business model, and provide the most advanced language tools. We expanded our capacity to provide services in Indigenous languages, and we increased cooperation with the language industry in Canada. We introduced ways to better support our employees, deliver the training they need, and take care of their mental health. And we revamped our recruitment processes and created partnerships to support the next generation of language professionals. For instance, we participate in the Masters in Conference Interpretation program at the University of Ottawa. We loan equipment and instructors to the university, and in return, we benefit from a pool of highly skilled new interpreters.
We are applying the same forward-looking approach as we adapt to the COVID-19 pandemic. Since mid-March, as you've seen, we've continued to focus on carrying out our mandate and helping Parliament meet its responsibility concerning the interpretation of proceedings and the translation of documents. That being said, we have the same issue with reduced capacity as the rest of government. Luckily for us, translation lends itself particularly well to telework, and we've been able to maintain our services while having our translators work from home. As for interpretation, which is the focus of our discussions today, the Bureau has been providing the service since 1959, and throughout the year, we have been successfully maintaining our services through the dedication of our outstanding employees and freelancers. In this period of pandemic, given the technical requirements of interpretation, interpreters must continue to work on-site in Parliament. However, I can assure you that their health is a top priority, and we have carefully applied expert advice to protect them. We have added portable interpretation booths and installed partition in existing booths so that there's some separation between interpreters who share the same booth. Interpretation booths are disinfected twice a day. We've provided interpreters with disinfectant wipes so that they can disinfect equipment before and after each assignment. We've loaned tablets to interpreters so that they can consult background information in the booth without having to handle printed documents. We have reduced the size of teams and applied physical distancing rules to prevent contact between interpreters. We've made parking spaces available to interpreters so that they do not have to use public transit. And we're taking into account the circumstances of interpreters who have young children or must stay at home for other reasons, and we're keeping the lines of communication open with the union. You will ask, can an interpreter work from home? We've started to explore this possibility, but remote interpretation poses major challenges. We use the term remote interpretation when one or more participants are not in the same location as the interpreters. In recent years, the increased popularity and accessibility of video conferencing has led to an ever-growing demand for remote interpretation. In response to this demand, the Translation Bureau began conducting its own test and studying international best practices. However, the sudden onset of the pandemic forced us to step up our efforts, and for the last few weeks, we've been actively working on this matter in collaboration with the House administration. We have determined that certain criteria must be met in order for remote interpretation to work. These include the following. All participants must wear a headset with a microphone to ensure clear sound quality. Participants must appear via video conference so that the interpreter can see their facial expressions and clearly communicate the tone of their message. Participants must strictly adhere to the rules for speaking and must wait their turn to speak. A technician must be in the room with the interpreters at all times to address any technical issues. The audio feed of the interpretation consoles must have limiters or compressor to prevent acoustic shock. Interpreters must be able to do sound check with the technician and participant before each meeting begins. And as always, participants who plan to read written statements must provide them in advance to our interpreters. These criteria are needed to establish the optimal conditions so that interpreter can provide high-quality services in a safe environment. Abiding by these criteria will not completely eliminate the risk of interpretation service interruptions due to the technology used by remote participants, but it will greatly reduce this risk and help ensure the best possible interpretation. The criteria on sound quality are particularly important since sound is the cornerstone of interpretation. For example, if the sound quality is poor, an interpreter may mix the words symptomatic and asymptomatic, which completely changes the message. Furthermore, poor sound quality puts the interpreter at risk. In the last 2 years, several health and safety incidents have been reported involving sound issues during teleconferences and video conferences. As regards the human resources required to provide interpretation at virtual sitting, the Translation Bureau will augment its team of interpreters. Variation in sound quality means interpreters have to concentrate harder, which means they have to work shorter shifts, which means we need to assign more interpreters per sitting. However, we will make every effort to meet this need.
Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee, our mission is clear. We're here to serve Parliament, and it is our duty to respond to that call. We are determined to continue our cooperation with the House administration and all our partners to support the proper functioning of a virtual Parliament. The Translation Bureau is proud to be able to help Parliament continue its work during the crisis, and we're proud to help the Government of Canada transmit to Canadians the information they need to stay healthy and follow the evolution of this situation in French, English, in American Sign Language, and in Quebec Sign Language. I want to particularly point out the incredible work of our official language interpreters and our sign language interpreters who participate in every press conference every day. The crisis has put their work in the foreground, and we're very grateful for their dedication. And in closing, I'd like to thank the interpreters at this sitting and all the employees who work in the background despite the difficult conditions that we have to make important meetings like this one a possibility. And I want to thank the precious cooperation of our partners at the Multimedia Service of the House of Commons and the General Directorate of Committees, whom you also probably appreciate. And in closing, ladies and gentlemen, we will be pleased to answer your questions.
Okay. Next, we have our witness, Mr. John Weigelt from Microsoft Canada. He's the National Technology Officer.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very pleased to be with you today.
My name is John Weigelt, and I'm the National Technology Officer for Microsoft in Canada. I've had the privilege of working with the federal government for my over 30-year career in trustworthy computing, starting in uniform in the Royal Canadian Air Force, in Treasury Board Secretariat as a public servant, and now as CTO as Microsoft Canada. I'm grateful for the opportunity to appear before this esteemed committee and its members today as you discuss how technology can support the continuation of the Parliament of Canada during this unprecedented time. My remarks will focus on a thoughtful and deliberate approach to using technology to support virtual parliamentary activities with privacy and security as the foundation. You may ask yourself why we're focusing on security as parliamentary proceedings are public and do not contain sensitive information. Microsoft believes that security must be the foundation of everything you do with technology, regardless if it's publicly available or involves sensitive material. Security protects against unwanted intrusions causing disruptions or introducing cyber threats. But first, some background. Microsoft has a long history here in Canada. Since the establishment of Microsoft Canada in 1985, Microsoft's presence has grown to include 10 regional offices around the country that employ more than 2,300 people. At our Microsoft Vancouver Development Center, over 700 employees are developing products that are used around the world. Cutting-edge research on artificial intelligence is also being conducted by PhDs and engineers at Microsoft Research Montreal. These unprecedented times have forced every person in the world to adapt and dramatically change all aspects of their lives, how we work, how we learn, and interact. We were proud to have enabled remote learning for students and educators. Virtual health visits are allowing for the delivery of healthcare while protecting patients and healthcare workers. And Microsoft Technology is empowering millions of Canadian workers in all sectors of the economy to work remotely during this COVID crisis. In fact, today, over 100,000 federal public servants are now working remotely using Microsoft Teams, and this number is growing every day. Today's technology and video conferencing capabilities are built on what we call cloud services. The cloud is an information technology infrastructure upon which these virtual activities rely, and the safety and reliability of this cloud is key. Microsoft has been a long-standing partner of the Government of Canada, supporting the development of a thoughtful and deliberate approach through policy, guidance, and standards for the government's adoption of cloud service. This strong partnership has enabled the rapid deployment of technology tools in response to the COVID crisis. Our Canadian data centers in Toronto and Quebec City were the first to undergo independent audits and reviews against the government's security standard. As a result, the government certified Microsoft services to safeguard the Government of Canada's information at the protected B level. This is the government security classification for sensitive and personal information. In addition, Microsoft has also worked with leading Canadian privacy experts to conduct a review of these services. We've published and shared this analysis in what are called foundational privacy impact assessments, setting a precedent across the industry. These assessments help public sector organizations of all types across the country understand how Microsoft Cloud services, including video conferencing, address their privacy obligations. In addition, we're the only cloud provider that publishes all of our compliance and audit information, as well as the results of our security tests publicly on our website. I'm here to tell you that technology exists today to support virtual parliaments in a secure manner. Using our Microsoft Teams platform, we've been supporting parliaments in various jurisdictions. For example, the UK House of Lords is currently sitting remotely via Microsoft Teams, as are committees of the Quebec National Assembly. Virtual activities in these jurisdictions have been the result of close collaboration between the various Microsoft teams and the procedural and technical teams of these legislatures. This is new for everybody, and putting in place a virtual parliamentary activity has required flexibility and adaptation on everyone's part. It's a mix of technology, process, and people. With over 75 million daily users worldwide and now having exceeded 2.7 billion meeting minutes in a day, Microsoft Teams provides a robust environment for people to do their best collaborative work. It includes video conferencing and has many of the same features you've come to know with Skype and Skype for Business. But video conferencing is only the beginning of what Microsoft Teams can do. While the emphasis on this conversation has been on video conferencing capability, this flexible platform offers a broad set of collaboration services that we believe are useful in digitally transforming government and committee meetings. For example, it could facilitate the transfer of meeting minutes, pre-readings, written submissions. While we recognize this is not a priority in the short term, this should be something that the Parliament looks at in the future term. Microsoft Teams has the ability to support this activity in a secure way. Further embedded in Teams is a variety of assistive technologies to support individuals with unique accessibility requirements due to mobility, seeing, or hearing challenges. We are pleased that Microsoft Teams is currently in the process of being deployed to each member of Parliament and employee of the House of Commons. To be clear, security is at the heart of everything we do at Microsoft. We employ over 3,500 security engineers and run the Microsoft Security Response Center, which operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and every day of the year. We analyze trillions of events encountered from our global footprint to keep ahead of threats. Since security is a shared responsibility that no single organization can address on their own, we have exceptionally strong connections to the government's cybersecurity team, and we work together to protect both federal governments and Canada's cyberspace. While the technology does exist to support virtual parliament, there are still privacy and security considerations despite the public nature of these meetings. For example, in the virtual space, how would you prevent unwanted disruptions by unauthorized individuals? Just imagine for a moment, if you will, if the public galleries are filled of hundreds of unruly spectators. In the physical space, the Sergeant at Arms and Parliamentary Protective Services would ensure that they don't cause unwanted disruptions. How do we put in place similar safeguards in a virtual space to protect the integrity of proceedings? Solving for these security and privacy issues is a matter of correctly configuring privacy and security controls, and also making sure that you have the right security development cycle. Similarly, individuals should have confidence that the software they deploy on devices, whether it's Windows, whether it's their Mac, their iPhone, or Android, only does what they expect it to do. Recognizing that this is a top priority for customers, almost 20 years ago, Microsoft implemented the Trustworthy Computing Initiative. This means that privacy and security are part of every step of the development of our products and services and follow the privacy by design principles which were invented here in Canada. This is a fundamental commitment that Microsoft makes to its customers. Microsoft's privacy commitments, which exceed those found in Canada's privacy legislation, provide the confidence that Microsoft will never use customer data for any other purpose than providing the service. In closing, I fully recognize the complexity of the procedural and technical work associated with examining remote options and applaud this committee's very important work and the work of the House of Commons. I have deep respect for the institutions of Parliament, and I'm confident that the possibilities technology can offer to support your work in a virtual fashion can enable parliamentary activities to take place in a new and different way, all while maintaining the integrity of the democratic system. It will be my pleasure to receive your questions. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Harry Mosley, the Global Chief Information Officer for Zoom Video Communications.
Hello. And thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee for inviting Zoom to participate in this important hearing today. I firmly believe the role you play and your decisions around how best to proceed with Parliament in these extraordinary times are truly significant. Ensuring that the House of Commons continues to be productive and operational is more important than ever. We at Zoom are committed to helping support your efforts and to providing any information you need in advance of your presentation to Parliament on May the 15th. With millions of people around the world working from home due to COVID-19, video communication companies like Zoom are playing an integral role in ensuring businesses, hospitals, schools, and importantly, governments can continue to collaborate securely and remain operational. Zoom recognized early on that we were uniquely positioned to help in this time of need, and we felt compelled to act and feel a tremendous responsibility to our users. In February, we committed to doing everything in our power to support those impacted by COVID-19, and that promise very much continues today. By way of background, I have over 40 years of technology experience, most recently as the CIO for KPMG US and the CIO for Blackstone. In December 2017, I retired, and shortly afterwards, Zoom invited me to join them as their global CIO. Once I met Eric Yuan, our CEO and founder, and conferred with industry veterans and my peers, I was inspired to join his elite team. Eric, who had 14 years of experience building WebEx, and a team of engineers founded Zoom in the US almost 10 years ago in their mission to build a seamless and frictionless video-first communications platform based on 4 principles: security, reliability, functionality, and cost effectiveness for our customers. There were several objectives, most notably the seamless and frictionless experience, intuitive ease of use, the elimination of the meeting tax, and doing this agnostically across platforms to enable the energy of the participants to be focused on the substance and not the logistics and operations of the meeting. Today, Zoom is the leader in modern enterprise video communications. Zoom's sole focus is providing a secure, reliable platform that works seamlessly across devices and is incredibly easy to use. We are proud of what we have accomplished with our users, from individual subscribers to the world's largest global enterprises, which is reflected in our customer satisfaction in the 90+ percentile. There is a reason people say, Zoom, it just works. In light of COVID-19, usage of Zoom has ballooned in recent months. We have grown from 10 million daily meeting participants as of December 2019 to over 300 million per day in April, with incredible service reliability. We are proud to be doing our part to keep people connected and organizations working during the pandemic. As part of this effort, we opened up the platform to new types of users, such as offering free video conferencing to primary and secondary schools around the world. To date, over 100,000 schools in 25 countries have used Zoom's free services to stay connected to their students during this pandemic. We have also served numerous government customers for years, and in the current environment with COVID-19, our service has become more essential than ever to ensure governments around the world can continue to function during the difficult days ahead. For example, in the UK, we are proud to be helping MPs fulfill their parliamentary duties. They have successfully rolled out a hybrid parliament with a maximum of 50 lawmakers physically in the debating chamber and another 120 permitted to join via Zoom. In Canada, we are humbled to have been selected to support the House of Commons. We have worked very closely with Soufiane Ben Moussa, the CTO of the House of Commons, to ensure that we are providing Zoom's trademark ease of use, coupled with training on Zoom's leading security features, as well as technical support to meet specifications such as enabling simultaneous channels for English and French. We have always been a leader in innovating at speed and scale, and are equally committed to doing that with respect to privacy and security. In its current form, Zoom unequivocally delivers a safe and secure virtual meeting environment when used with the appropriate safeguards to protect meetings. As sophisticated organizations across the globe do exhaustive security reviews of our user, network, and data center layers, they continue to confidently select Zoom for complete deployment. In fact, we have seen a surge in this regard recently. To echo the words of our CEO, our chief concern is ensuring that the safety, privacy, and security of our platform is worthy of the trust our users have put in us. As such, and in light of new use cases and public attention on Zoom, we have made a number of changes across the platform. We have wasted no time in executing the 90-day plan we announced on April 1st to better identify, address, and fix issues proactively. A summary of our plan, including all of the actions we committed to, can be found in the briefing materials we submitted. A couple of examples include, we enacted a feature freeze and shifted all of our engineering resources to focus on trust, safety, security, and privacy. We also launched an industry-agnostic CISO Council in partnership with leading CISOs to facilitate an ongoing dialogue regarding security and privacy best practices. Most recently, we announced robust security enhancements with the general availability of Zoom 5.0, which, among other key features, adds support for AES 256 GCM encryption across Zoom's infrastructure. This increased level of encryption enables Zoom to provide industry-leading protection for meeting data and resistance against tampering and unauthorized access. Zoom's security features, which had previously been accessed throughout the meeting menus, are now at hosts' fingertips. They are grouped together and easily found by clicking the security icon in the meeting menu bar on the host's interface. With regards to data routing, there are several facts that I would like to share. The Zoom platform only collects information necessary to provide the service. Where all meeting participants are using the Zoom client, all meeting data, audio, video, and content is fully encrypted between all participants, and it is never decrypted until it reaches a participant's device, including its transit through our data centers. There are exceptions to this, such as a participant joining via a phone line, a cloud recording, or other features, for example, streaming to YouTube without encryption being enabled. Zoom has 17 data centers around the world, one in Toronto and one in Vancouver. We supplement our data centers with cloud providers, which, among other things, are used for authentication, cloud recordings, and metrics. We also understand that there are concerns and sensitivity around data traveling to certain countries. We maintain geofencing around China specifically, ensuring that users outside of China do not have their meeting data routed through China. We are aware of recent reports suggesting that a small fraction of non-China meetings were inadvertently routed through Chinese servers. Zoom investigated this issue and has ensured that it will never happen again. To provide additional comfort and control for our users, we recently added a feature that enables paid Zoom customers to customize which data center regions their account can use for real-time meeting traffic. And we also enhanced the Zoom administration dashboard to show additional transparency on data routing. With respect to privacy, Zoom does not and has never sold user data, does not monitor meetings or contents, and complies with all applicable privacy laws, rules, and regulations in the jurisdictions within which it operates. Zoom has fully implemented compliance programs designed to meet the requirements of the Canadian Data Protection Regulations, including the Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act.
Thank you, Mr. Mosley. Our time is up. Do you have much more to summarize?
About 1 minute.
Okay.
Max.
Just 1 minute then.
Yeah, we know there have been a lot of media attention on Zoom due to recent new use cases as noted previously. I would note Zoom is being recognized to have in short order seriously stepped up to enhance its privacy and security by amplifying safeguards and addressing issues quickly. In conclusion, I can assure you that we continue to be the most easy to use and functional platform on the market, and our commitment to security cannot be topped. This is also a continuous journey for us. And rest assured, security is and will be at the top of our list. We are grateful to have the opportunity to speak to you this evening, answer any questions you may have about how video conferencing companies and Zoom specifically can support the House of Commons. We think of our clients as partners. Our singular objective is your success in using our platform securely and in a reliable fashion. I know that Zoom is well positioned to continue serving the House of Commons. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Mr. Mosley, and thank you to all our witnesses. I think I can speak on behalf of the committee in saying that this has been a very informative panel and meeting, hitting on issues such as respect for Parliament, privilege of members, bilingualism, which is very important, of course, and of course our technological solutions, including how we can make sure they're safe and ensure privacy as well. We will continue into our first round of questions with the members, and perhaps we can see we will definitely get through the first round of 6-minute questions. And at that point, I'll ask the committee members as to whether we can get in a few more questions after that. Mr. Richards, we'll start with you.
If I can, first on a point of order, Madam Chair. So, sorry, can you just refresh my memory, I guess? The first round of questions would mean what?
The first round of questions, and of course, I'm willing to go as long as we're able to, and I have to consult with the clerk as well. The first round of questions is 6 minutes. The Conservatives get 1, the Liberals get 1, the Bloc get 1, and the NDP get 1.
Okay. Perhaps could we as a committee, just for the sake of managing our time, decide on what we are going to do in terms of questioning now before we begin?
Absolutely. We could, if I may maybe suggest, we could change it into 5-minute rounds and then maybe do the next round for 4 minutes. I think we could squeeze it in, but let me just confirm with the clerk to see what we can manage.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I think you're on mute.
So you have some flexibility to kind of proceed with the regular round.
Okay, yes, I realized I was on mute. I was just conferring with the staff in the committee room, and we do have some flexibility on behalf of them. They would be able to accommodate us up to 8:30 if that is okay with the witnesses and the committee members, and that would allow us to get in the second round as well. Yep.
Madam Chair.
Some of the witnesses have said it's okay. Yes, Mr. Gerritsen?
Can we just commit ourselves to that first and second round then? And so if that ends at 8:15, then we'll end at 8:15. Is that agreed? We'll just do the first and second rounds?
Is that okay with everyone? Can I just see a nod of heads maybe if... Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Thanks for resolving that at the get-go. So we will start with our first questioner, Mr. Richards.
Sure. Thanks, Madam Chair. Most of my, if not all of my questions will be for the Translation Bureau. First start with when we were studying the Indigenous languages in House proceedings in the previous Parliament, I think 2 or 3 years ago now, when the Translation Bureau came before the committee at that time, speaking about remote interpretation that was being tried at that point, the indication we received from the Translation Bureau then, and I'll quote, "There are still issues that need to be addressed before we offer this service on a regular basis. The 2 key issues are audio quality and bandwidths, which can be erratic, resulting in variable audio quality for interpreters and clients alike," end quote. We had a lot of other witnesses at that time that had raised this issue as something that there was concerns about as well. Wondering if those issues have been resolved satisfactorily for you to be able to change your opinion on this at this point.
Thank you for your question. Sound quality is a cornerstone for interpretation. So when participants are remote, the sound is really dependent on the internet connection of the participant and if they're using a headset and some of the technical requirements I've mentioned in my opening remarks. So it's very important for the Translation Bureau when we provide services that those technical requirements are met. When they are met, it means that there will be less risk with service interruption because if an interpreter cannot hear, they will not be able to interpret. So we're working closely with our clients, with the House administration. It's really a team effort to make sure that technical requirements are met so that the quality of sound is sufficient for an interpreter to be able to do his job, his or her job.
Okay. So, like, would you say there's a chance that quality will suffer as a result then, or?
Quality will suffer. I know, because what we ask interpreter is if they cannot hear, they cannot interpret. So we've provided them with and to protect their health and safety as well. So when you hear inaudible or you hear the interpreter that are stopping, it's because really they cannot hear and they won't guess to make sure that they deliver quality of service.
Okay, and so certainly we saw that say yesterday in the I forget, the committee of the whole that sort of placed this question period, that there was times where interpreters were indicating that they couldn't hear satisfactorily. And you also mentioned in your opening remarks, and I know in briefs that we received from the some of the associations, that certainly there's been a need for more interpreters, just given the fact that they aren't in the same room, the visual ability to see is not there. It's harder on that sort of what you indicated as well, and I can certainly understand how that would be the case. Just wanted to get your take on this. This lack of visual ability to see in some cases, the more difficulty for interpreters, and just tell us a little bit about how your team is holding up. Have you been challenged as a result?
Mr. Richard, sorry, I'll pause your time. Could you just put your headset on? There's some static that we're hearing, and it's difficult for the interpreters.
Sorry, yeah, I haven't got it handy actually. Unfortunately, that's why I'm not using it. So my apologies on that. I think it was just my phone. I'll move that away. Is that better? Yeah.
Yeah, it is better. So if you could be as close as possible to the screen and move your phone.
Sure, understood. I did move the phone. Were you able to get my question, or do you need me to repeat it?
I was able to get your question.
Okay, thank
you. Yes, for when we have the interpreter interpret when there's remote participant, we need to increase the team strength. So normally, in average, it varies depending on the type of assignment, but an interpreter in normal sitting will do it for about 6 hours. With remote interpretation, it's much harder for them to do it, and it increases the cognitive load. So in average, they will do about 4 hours instead of 6. So we bring more teams of people to do the work. In addition to that, we've added a coordinator, which is also an interpreter on site, that will deal with the technical issues with the technician, that will make sure they get all the documentation so that, it's much easier for the interpreter to do their work. So in summary, they do shorter time in the booth. We have coordinator and we, yes?
What challenges, if any, has that created? Has it created challenges for the interpreters? Have there been, more sick days, or have there been, challenges and how are they holding up? Because, there's obviously only a limited number of professionals qualified to do this work. So wanting to see what kind of an impact it's had on them.
Yeah, thank you for raising that point. I have to say that the conditions are difficult for the interpreter. Some interpreters have reported incident that, after assignment, they have headache, earache, and fatigue. there were no incidents related to acoustic shock or injury requiring medical assistance, but it's much harder on the interpreter to do their work because the sound varies, the connection of participant, they really have to concentrate harder. And I'm not an interpreter by trade, and I really admire the work of my team because what they do is that they listen to the participant, then in their head they have to analyze, they have to translate the information, they have to put it in the other language in a flow that works, and they speak on top of that. And they do that all simultaneously, all at the same time. So it's really the cognitive load of what they have to do is extremely difficult in normal circumstances. So when it's remote, it's even harder.
Okay, thank you. That's
about all the time we have, Mr. Richards.
Okay, no problem. Thanks, Madam.
Okay. Mr. Garrettson.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Mosley, I've been dying to ask you this since we started this meeting. Is that a real or virtual background? You're on mute. Do you know how to use the platform?
I did some training earlier today.
I think you said it's a virtual background.
That's a virtual background. I can put up other virtual backgrounds.
No, my time is limited. But my question for you is, what is the minimum required internet speed for Zoom to function properly?
Yeah, so great question. Thank you. So, Madam Chair, a great part of our technology is our technology architecture, which is radically different. When a meeting starts at Zoom, like this meeting, it's held in one of our 17 global data centers around the world. Now, I would like to be clear with respect to the Canadian House of Commons, your meetings and all of your data is all resident in Canada in 2 data centers, Vancouver and Toronto. And none of your meetings is ever held outside. None of your data is ever held outside. So not saying it differently, everything for Canada's House of Commons is inside Canada and not outside.
And
now I'll come to your question. It had to be explained. So when that meeting happens, it connects to each of the endpoints, and we handle that network connection discreetly, endpoint by endpoint. And we can tolerate what's called a 45% packet loss and still have a fantastic experience because we always prioritize the audio over video over content. So we handle really poor networks in extraordinarily good circumstances.
So I guess my question is more, the panel before you, we talked a lot about internet connectivity in rural parts of the country, and we actually heard some numbers about, people are getting 8 megabytes per second here, so on and so forth. Do you have an actual number as to what the minimum number of megabytes per second is required for Zoom to work properly?
I don't, but we can certainly get that.
Yeah, if you could, Mr. Weigelt, I apologize for pronouncing that incorrectly. Does Microsoft have any information on their Teams platform in terms of connectivity?
Well, we see connectivity as being a challenge across Canada, just that access for connectivity. And it's one of the things that's critically important for us as a company. We have our Airband project, which is looking to reach out and provide connectivity options for where there is no access. We're quite proud that we have 2,500 people using Teams out of Nunavut and being able to get exceptional services over a satellite link. Our key concern is around that latency, what we call it. So it's that delay, that lag between the beginning and the end of a conversation. And so as was indicated with the other tool sets, we make sure that we prioritize the voice conversation first, and then we're able to then manage across what we call disadvantaged links.
And I can appreciate that you don't have an exact number either, but if we could get from both of you some kind of breakdown information in terms of what is required in terms of internet speed to have a decent connection. And I'm full disclosure, as a computer engineer, that was my original training. So I can appreciate that it's very complex and not as simple as just giving me a number like that. But if we could get some info on that, that'd be great. Madame Liberté, you were talking and you had some extremely good points about translation and how this is going to work. And this committee right now is tasked, at least my understanding, is with how do you do a virtual parliament in the short term in light of COVID-19. And if we were to design something that was going to last over a much longer time, I think that we could really drill down into some of the getting to the core issues of what was required in terms of, what you were asking. But if there was one thing that is really necessary, or a couple things that are really necessary to make this work in the short term, given the situation that we're in right now, improvements that can be made upon, what would those be?
I would say the most important thing is for people to wear headset. Because, we've done a lot of tests over the last few years and even more over the last few weeks. And the quality of sound is much better when people wear their headset. So this is of prime importance.
But if we were to make of one of our recommendations that headsets be mandatory, that would be something that your organization would support, obviously?
Yes.
And is there anything else on that same theme that comes to mind, and perhaps in terms of the impact and health implications on employees? Anything that we can do to deal with this in the short term? You have about 30 seconds.
I will send the questions to Matthew Ball, the chief interpreter, and
if you could answer that, sir.
Sure. There's a few things that really can improve significantly the situation for interpreters. One that is not possible for everyone, but for many people, it's to have a hardwired Ethernet connection. It's what I'm using today. It means that you're not dependent on Wi-Fi and connectivity issues. Another one that's really important and really easy for everyone is to send your texts in advance. I'm sure all of the witnesses here today had texts that were prepared. Members of Parliament are often reading from texts. It's really helpful for the interpreters to receive those texts, especially when you plan to read them quickly, because it tells them basically what you're going to say. It has the facts and figures there. And interpreters are used to checking against verification, so they won't read it blindly, but it really helps them. So those are two most important things for us.
Perfect.
Thank you. That's all the time we have. Madame Normandin.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Je commencerai avec quelques questions pour Madame la Liberté, Monsieur Ball, si c'est possible. Vous avez parlé du fait qu'on avait besoin de plus d'interprètes présentement.
You said that we needed more interpreters right now to ensure the safety of interpreters. And since there's a larger number of Anglophone speakers in the House of Commons than Francophones, I suppose there's greater pressure on interpreters who work from English to French. As we saw recently, there was an announcement made that cleaning products would not necessarily be labeled in French. Because in the context of a crisis, this might be a problem. I'd like to know from you, was there any fear that institutional bilingualism cannot be provided as ideally as it could in other circumstances? Answer, thank you very much. All our interpreters, all the interpreters who work for the Bureau and Parliament are accredited by our Bureau. They're accredited in their mother tongue and their what we call their B language. They can all do both. The Bureau is used to the fact that there's more English spoken in Canada than French, so we don't see an issue when it comes to capacity for one language or the other in the short or long term. We have the capacity, we have great capacity in both official languages. Could that mean that more people would be interpreting from their B language to their A language, for instance? I would say that I don't think so, because we have a very good capacity in both official languages. There are interpreters that are very comfortable in doing both ways. There are interpreters who are our employees or freelancers who are very comfortable with that or less comfortable with that. Nobody is forced to work into a direction they're not comfortable with, especially in Parliament where it's broadcast and so on. So we've never had an issue with that, and quite honestly, we do not anticipate any problem in the near future. Thank you. I'd also like to know how it works when it comes to the feedback you get from interpreters, the day-to-day problems they face, the way you get that information, the volume of information? Has there been an increase in volume of such feedback?
Merci pour.
Thank you for the question. Yes, in fact, we work very closely with our interpretation teams, and after each test, after each assignment, interpreters give us feedback. And we also work closely with the union. We meet union representatives twice a week, and we discuss all the issues that have arisen and how we can improve those issues. We look for solutions to the issues that arise. For example, we put plexiglass dividers in the booths. We have added booths in committee rooms. We did that this week. We work closely with them, and we always try to find solutions to mitigate any of those issues that may arise. Obviously, this isn't easy for them. They're working in difficult circumstances, and they still show up to work and they do extraordinary work regardless of those difficult circumstances. Thank you. I have a few questions for Mr. Mosley and Mr. Weigelt. We've been working on setting up a virtual parliament, and therefore we need to use principles from actual parliaments. I have some practical questions. Do you think on the platforms you could be able to raise your hand, like in a classroom, and then the speaker will choose who they give the floor to? Because perhaps what you'll need an order of precedence, for example. And I'd like to know if it would be possible to have some sort of time clock so that we can actually see the time that's left, our speaking time that's left.
So you can see I raised my hand. So yes, on the, sorry, I didn't address Madam Chair, my apologies. Madam Chair.
That's okay, go ahead.
Sorry, not used to these normal proceedings. So Madam Chair, you can see I raised my hand. So we already have that capability built into our platform. I can lower my hand. And with respect to timing, we have a time clock which shows the duration of the meeting. But if you were interested in a timing feature such that, you know, if I have like 10 minutes to speak, have it count down, that is something I would be happy to take back to our product people and see if we can get that into the platform for you. We have a practice at Zoom at listening to our clients, and if that's a feature that would be helpful for the Canadian House of Commons to use our platform, then we will evaluate that, and I can come back to you by the end of this week at latest.
And so within the Teams platform, you have the capability also to raise your hand to get the attention of the speaker. Much like the House of Commons has provided guidance around how to best leverage video conferencing, we also recommend that the chat stream form part of that interaction that we have. So ability to then share thoughts as you go through there, because sometimes people don't always watch to raise their hand. We also have a timer that you can leverage to do people timer to see how much time is in the meeting or how long people have spoken. And I think those things are part of that. Look, when we deployed these solutions at the beginning, we deployed them in support of what we thought were generalized uses. As we build them out, we've heard from our customers, be they in the education center, be they in the healthcare center, that they need tweaks to those particular tool sets. And we've gone back to our engineers to make sure that those tweaks come in. And you see those tweaks rolling out April 21st. You see over the next few weeks, you'll get increasing number of features that are there. And that's the power of cloud services.
Thank you. That's all the time we have. Ms. Blaney, please.
Thank you. I thank all the people for being here today, all the witnesses. I appreciate so much your testimony. I'm first going to ask my questions of the Translation Bureau. I understand that this kind of remote assembly can be dangerous to interpreters because the sound quality is so bad. I'd just like to get a little bit clearer about what those dangers actually are for the interpreters.
So thank you for the question. the sound quality, so when people, so with the internet connection and the sound varying from participant to participant, interpreter will have to increase the volume, will have to listen harder, will have to concentrate harder, and there's an increased risk of acoustic shock, or, you know, as I said, when they come back from the assignment, they have headache, earache, and extreme fatigue. So it makes it very difficult for them, and their hear is really how they work. So any damage to their hearing will imply, you know, that they will no longer be able to work. So we have to be very careful with respect to protecting their health and safety, and it's really a matter of, you know, the sound playing with the volume. Making sure they understand, and they're very, very dedicated, and they will do their utmost to deliver the service, and sometimes to the detriment of their own hearing.
So has there been any increase to injury or fatigue incident reports during the past month since Parliament committees have started and now the entire House is meeting virtually? And I'm just wondering, if there has been, could you supply this committee with some numbers?
So thank you. The answer is yes, but with respect to the numbers, we will have to come back to the committee with the exact number.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'd like to take this opportunity to speak with Microsoft for a quick second. You know, the member from Zoom talked earlier about where information is stored and said that it was going to be stored, all the conferencing information from here stored in Canada. I'm just wondering, where is your information stored when it comes to things that are happening in Canada and specifically around the House of Commons?
We commit to storing information in our data centers in Toronto and Quebec City, and those data centers are connected with fiber optic cable that runs within the country. And so that we feel is the differentiator for our services.
Okay. Another question that I have is, of course, what makes Canada specifically wonderful and unique is the fact that we have 2 official languages, and it is an obligation of Parliament to always be representative in those languages. And as we go through this, I think it's, you know, as a person who's only an English speaker, I think it's so important that we protect the right of both of those languages being respected. So I'm just wondering, one of the challenges, of course, are making sure that there's platforms with interpretation. Is there any plans to develop this particular part in your programming for platforms that would work for Parliament?
You know, we recognize that the Constitution holds the ability to work in both official languages, and we recognize that the Translation Bureau is a unique Canadian institution that was formed. And so being able to do translation in both official languages and extend that to the 60 plus Indigenous languages that are supported as well. And so it's you can do that today using supplemental solutions, having a variety of different channels over the same venue, as we heard, can be fraught with challenges. The voice clarity might not be what it means. We're working hard to find a solution to be able to build that into the platform. One of the things to consider as we look at this transformation that's underway is the use of artificial intelligence-enabled transcription to assist the translators. So Microsoft sees AI as empowering individuals, not replacing them. And so being able to do voice transcription can then provide that prompt or that support to the translators. And if you can imagine how it sounds when the language comes through a drive-through terminal, right? You can hear the kind of the cracky voice you can barely understand. We found that the AI tools can transcribe that exceptionally well and then provide that assist to the great work that our translators are doing from the Translation Bureau.
Thank you. And so I'm going to go to Zoom next. 2 questions. The first one, of course, is on the interpretation. I understand, and we're using that right now, that there is a bit of system. I'm just wondering if this is something specific for Canada or if you're working to iron out, because there's definitely some challenges with that service. And the second part is, I'm just curious, how many people in Canada does Zoom employ?
So with respect to the, Madam Chair, with respect to the transcription, the translation, sorry, respect to translation, we introduced translation in October of last year as part of our platform, and we can have numerous different languages available on the platform. We also have real-time transcription and closed caption for the hearing and other services of that nature. So I think that's the answer to your first part. And the second part is I don't have the number of employees we employ, but I will make sure that we get that back to you tomorrow.
Okay, that would be really helpful. So one of the particulars, though, is the translation services that are through Zoom are not perfect. So I'm just wondering about the improvements upon that as well.
Yeah, so with respect to improvements on translation, I actually had a call earlier today with your CIO and your CTO for the House of Commons, and we're connecting them with our product team. I think that actually might have occurred already today. And,
Thank you.
And look to improve upon that.
Thank you so much. That's all the time we have. Next up is Mr. Duncan.
Madam Chair, can I just ask on the second round, do we have 4 or 5 minutes each?
I believe, we didn't really necessarily agree on that.
I'm good with whatever. I'm going to set a timer for myself, so I actually have a chance for the questioners to respond.
Yeah, I think 4 minutes would be good because if you want to end before the 8:30 time, we'll set it for 4 minutes. Thank you.
I'm good with that. Thank you. I want to address some of my questions to Zoom. Mr. Mosley, do you have a contract with the House of Commons specifically, or is it they've purchased what's available online?
Yeah, we are working through the Master Services Agreement for the House of Commons, and I believe that there is, this is not just purchased online. We have an account team who are resident in Canada working with members of the House of Commons.
So is there a copy of the contract that perhaps we would be able to see as a committee to review, or is that not possible yet or not signed yet?
I don't have the status on the contract, and I don't. I suspect that it can be shared with you. I don't see any reason why it couldn't be, but that's not something I control.
Appreciate that. Do you have any other contracts with the Government of Canada, or just kind of the House of Commons right now?
I'd have to check. I don't remember.
Okay. I just appreciate that whenever you get the chance. You've addressed some of the comments or recent changes you made about the routing of data, and I want to kind of go on another angle about data protection or what is done with it. We've heard different rumors, and maybe give you a chance to address some of these. Is it true that Zoom data is sent to Facebook, regardless of whether someone has a Facebook account? Can you discuss that?
We never sent any data to Facebook. That is not true. There was device information collected through the Facebook SDK, and when we understood that, we immediately changed that within 24 hours for the Facebook login. But no meeting data, no subscription data, no content, no chat, no nothing went to Facebook.
Appreciate that. And then, and the reason I'm asking these questions too is that sometimes I get concerned of precedents that we may set as we enter into these relationships of what's done. As we have other committees that are taking a look at privacy laws, I would just hate for them to come back to say, well, look, the House of Commons does it, members of Parliament do it, so it should be in law, those types of things. So I appreciate that. Another aspect, and a lot of things we hear about, is selling data or information to third parties, like for advertising. Do you do any of that whatsoever? Any data, any marketing, anything?
Nothing. Zero, zilch, zero. It's like we have no intention of it, never have, never will. It is not our business model.
Appreciate that. Thank you. If we can go, just a quick question for Citizens Lab. We mentioned about the Zoom platform, and the line that's been used about is a gold rush for cyber spies. Do you agree with that assessment? Is it a Zoom-specific problem, or are there many platforms that still have similar gaps to the challenges that you've addressed and others have addressed in media reports and studies?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So to answer your question, the comment we made, the evaluation we made about Zoom was earlier in April 3rd, and then we released a second report April 8th. And subsequently, we've had conversations with the company and the CEO, and they've made some significant steps towards improvement. They've laid out a 90-day plan. So I think they should be commended for the steps that they have taken. As it stands now, we would still not recommend Zoom for especially sensitive communications. So for something like this, it's fine. Something like the Parliament itself, that's fine. But if you're having discussions in camera or in caucus, I would not recommend it at this time, at least not until
I apologize to cut you off. I've only got about 30 seconds left, and I promised my colleague, Mr. Richards, I would give him that last minute or so if I can, Madam Chair. Sorry, but I appreciate the context and the update on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to just move a motion, and I'll explain in a second, that the committee invite the International Association of Conference Interpreters, Canadian Division, and the Canadian Association of Professional Employees to appear at the first meeting of the committee on the week of May the 4th. Now, the reason for that is we've received letters and a request to appear from both of those organizations who represent some of the interpreters that are used in our proceedings. And the information that is in those letters seems to differ somewhat from the things that we've heard today. So I think it would be incumbent upon us as a committee to hear from them just to get that perspective. I do think there would be time to do so in that first meeting we have scheduled next week. I would also just point out, Madam Chair, if it can be agreed by unanimous consent of the committee, I would be happy to set the vote on this aside until the rest of the people with questions have a chance to do that, and we can do the vote on this motion at the end of the meeting, if that is helpful.
Mr. Richards, can you repeat the second witness that you'd like to have called? I believe we did receive emails, but you were breaking up your sound.
Sure. The Canadian Association of Professional Employees was the other organization.
Okay. We have received these requests, and they were just received I think yesterday and some today. So we are trying to figure out how to incorporate them into our study. And I don't know if we need to go to a vote on this. Are all members in agreement that we can try to incorporate them into our future panels? Okay. Mr. Richards, is that okay as long as they're here before the 5th?
I am satisfied. I'm certainly satisfied with that if there's an agreement that we would hear from them. And yeah, my suggestion would strongly be that I think that it looks like, we have room that first time next week if that can be accommodated. But yeah, certainly it would be good to have them maybe come for the first half of that meeting, and then the second half of that meeting could be the officials. We're going to come back to wrap this up. Yeah, that would be my suggestion. So.
Thank you for that, certainly. And now we will start with Dr. Duncan for 4 minutes, please. Oh, please unmute yourself.
Are we on? Good evening, everyone. First of all, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being part of this. We appreciate your time and expertise. I'm going to go to Mr. Weigelt first. Do you think remote voting is possible, and under what circumstances, please?
Do you mean in the context of virtual parliament or?
Yes, in virtual parliament.
Right. So Microsoft is a very strong partner-driven organization. We have over 1,200 partners in Canada that help deliver solutions on top of our Teams platform. And we do have partners that support virtual voting for our communities. And so we do believe that it's possible on our platform.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Mosley, do you believe that remote voting is possible? And do you think it's possible to adopt a secure remote voting system?
Yes,
Please.
I do. Yes, I do. And as part of our Zoom platform, we have the ability to impromptu ask questions to the participants and get their responses in real time during the meeting.
Do you think there are ways to authenticate or safeguard a remote vote? To both of you.
I have to think about that. I would like to come back on that answer, but I would believe that we could authenticate the vote, but I'd have to confirm that.
Thank you. And Mr. Weigelt, do you think it's possible to authenticate?
Absolutely. So based upon our enterprise heritage, we leverage those credentials, that identification that you harness for your day-to-day work within Parliament. And so being able then to recognize that throughout the voting process, I think is critically important.
Thank you. And Mr. Weigelt, what measures would you suggest to protect the integrity of the vote, please?
So there are a number of cryptographic measures that can be put in place to protect the integrity of the voting materials, so that they don't get tampered with along the way or after they've been cast.
Would it be possible to table with the committee what those measures would be?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And Mr. Mosley, do you think an MP should have to authenticate their identity after casting a remote vote?
Well, they authenticated into the meeting, therefore we know who they are, and as the vote is being cast by the MP, then it's connected to the authenticated individual. So I don't think they'd need to further authenticate for the vote.
Thank you. Can I ask Professor from Western, I don't see her, Declaircy, I believe. Can you tell us which countries are using remote voting at this point, please?
Sorry, that was the professor from the last panel. So, oh no, Declaircy, she's right there. She's right there. Okay.
I hope that's off my time, Madam Chair.
No, go on.
Madam Chair, thank you for the question. I have not carefully tracked what other legislatures have moved to online voting. Some of the witnesses here have mentioned some, like
thank you,
Quebec,
Professor Declaircy. I looked at the Interparliamentary Union yesterday, and it's been updated as of yesterday. It includes Belgium, Brazil, Chile, Poland, Spain, and I believe the UK and Estonia are under consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Duncan. Next, we have Mr. Richards for 4 minutes.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I actually didn't realize I had another round, so that's fine, but I do have some questions, so happy to take it. With the interpretation, I was asked of our witness from Zoom about translation. And translation being available by a platform. That is the platform we are.
Mr. Richards, could you, if it's your phone, could you move that away again? There's a lot of static.
Okay. I don't know.
Okay. If that's
that,
what it is.
Wasn't that close,
okay.
But is it better now? Okay. Just in regards to the platform we are currently using is Zoom, and the question was asked by Ms. Blaney about translation. Now, translation and interpretation are in fact two different things, obviously, and the answer with regards to translation was that it is available, but simultaneous interpretation is another matter. I've been told, and I have not verified this, but that on Zoom and other platforms that are available, simultaneous interpretation is not something that's available, that the House of Commons has had to make some accommodations to piggyback on Zoom to be able to make simultaneous interpretation work. I'll ask, I guess, both the Translation Bureau if you can verify whether simultaneous interpretation is in fact something you're using through Zoom, or is it something that there's had to be a workaround figured, and maybe I'll also just give Mr. Mosley a chance to indicate whether simultaneous interpretation is something that is available on the platform.
So thank you for the question. Where the Translation Bureau is not responsible for the technological aspect related to interpretation. So that's a question that would be best directed to House administration, those responsible for multimedia.
So you're not aware of what the arrangements were then?
No.
Okay, no problem. That certainly is a question we can save, and we do have that opportunity again next week. Mr. Mosley, you didn't indicate earlier about translation. What about simultaneous interpretation? Is it available through the platform currently?
I'm not sure, Madam Chair, thank you for the question. I'm not sure I understand what simultaneous interpretation is.
Okay.
Excuse me.
So I could probably best let our translation bureau explain it. I think I could explain it, but they would probably explain it better. So maybe I'll let them do that. But essentially, the difference is translation is, where
I understand
someone speaks and then translation is provided after they've finished speaking. With simultaneous interpretation, what they're doing is as the person is speaking, the interpretation and the translation is being done in real time, essentially.
Gotcha.
If you want a better explanation, I can let the translation.
No. Okay, I'm good now. Thank you. Yes. So, our simultaneous translation is the simultaneous interpretation of the spoken language is real time, and it's done as part of the existing platform.
It is okay.
There's no add-ins to that.
So as you're speaking, I can be hearing what you're saying in another language at the same time.
That is absolutely correct, and we moderated 20% of the speaker and 80% of the translator, and the reason we do that is so that you can hear the tone of the speaker as well as the words.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. And let me just see here. What else did I have? I sort of put in my notes away, but I do have some other questions I wanted to ask. I guess probably back with the translation bureau again.
That's about all the time we have. And I think I could further clarify that translation is, I believe, in writing and interpretation is oral. Is that right, Madame Liberté? Okay. So that's the difference between translation and interpretation. One's oral and one is written. We'll move on though to Madam Pettypod Taylor, and after that there has been a request by Ms. Blaney to complete this whole second round. So we'll have 2 minutes for Madam Norman Day and 2 minutes for Ms. Blaney.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Un commentaire en français, puis de là, une question en anglais. Mon commentaire est pour
My question is for Ms. La Liberté and Mr. Ball. I think I speak on behalf of all my colleagues when I say that we greatly appreciate the services you provide day after day in the House of Commons. Since I'm a native of New Brunswick, the only officially bilingual province in Canada, I want to tell you that the two official languages are extremely important to us, and therefore we thank you very much.
For a moment, sorry, I thought, sometimes these things just get better on their own. Would you remind repeating that question, because we could not hear the interpreters at the same. We should be able to hear the interpretation a little bit louder in the language of choice, and right now you were louder than the interpreter, and that was a little difficult. So if we could try that once more. Make sure your language is selected to French if that wasn't done before.
So my first comment in French, I simply want to underscore our appreciation to Ms. La Liberté and Mr. Ball. I know that I'm speaking on behalf of all our colleagues because we appreciate the service you render every day in the House of Commons. As a native of New Brunswick, the only bilingual province in Canada, the two official languages are very important to us, and also I appreciate that. So my question is,
and it is for Mr. Mosler. And I have to say, yesterday I realized that there's a new verb out there, and it's called zooming, because we've been doing an awful lot of zooming lately. But a few quick questions that I have for you. I'm wondering if you would be able to tell us what steps that Zoom is taking to protect our personal data. We've heard a lot about that in our first session today. And also, if you could talk to us about what steps that you're taking to protect our privacy. Thank you.
Yes. So security, privacy, and protecting data is paramount at Zoom. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we take that very seriously. And it is one of the 4 core principles that Zoom is built on. We've made an abundance of change over as part of the 90-day plan, which has been referenced a couple of times in this session. most notably the upgrade to our AES 256 GCM encryption, which is one of the highest level of encryption service. Everything is encrypted from a digital device from the time it leaves the platform all the way through the network, through our data center until it reaches the destination. Everything is fully encrypted at rest. We have defaulted to complex passwords. We have defaulted to waiting rooms. We have defaulted to, if you did a cloud recording, to having that with a forced complex password as well.
And did I understand that there's additional security features that we can purchase to make sure that there's added security measures in place?
No, Madam Chair, the encryption services, the security services are paramount and are available. They are part of the existing platform in its entirety.
Okay.
So we take it very seriously.
Great. And one final question for John, and I can't pronounce your last name, I'm sorry. I'm just curious to know, how many employees does Microsoft have in Canada?
We have over 3,200 employees in Canada with very strong development capability in Vancouver. We're quite proud of that. And Microsoft Research in Montreal, which is doing leading edge research in AI and in AI use in languages. And so we're quite proud of that capacity.
Great, thank you. That's all, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Seeing the clock is 8:31. They do need to clear out the room. I know you requested Ms. Blaney some time, and we had a couple of issues occur. Ms. Norman Day, Ms. Blaney, I really want to give you the time, but they're telling me in the room that they do need to clear the room. So is that okay if we call this meeting to a close for today, and maybe perhaps we can work something out for tomorrow's meeting? I know it won't be the same witnesses, of course, but okay. So I guess that is the end to this meeting. I did have a couple of housekeeping things. I'm going to just flag them today because we don't have enough time, and we could discuss them tomorrow if needed. The next meeting is April 30th, and the first panel will be other parliaments or institutions, and the second panel will be procedural, legal, and constitutional witnesses. Also want to remind everybody that to start thinking about recommendations for the final report. We will really only have about 2 meetings to discuss the draft report, so as much as possible if we can start thinking about that, or if there are going to be any dissenting reports, but we can speak about that tomorrow. Yes, Ms. Blaney.
I just want to ask, is there a timeline for having those recommendations in? I think that would be helpful for myself.
I've been informed by the analyst that by May 7th or so, he may be able to have an intermediate or a little bit of a draft report done, but then by May 11th, we should have the complete draft report done. And then, yes, I'm getting the thumbs up. And so we have 2 days after that, and we need to have everything completed by the 13th, ideally, to get our report done for the 15th. And that includes dissenting, all our recommendations, and enough time for translation so that we can submit for the 15th. But we can discuss it a little bit more tomorrow if you like, and we can carve out some time for that. Well, I wanted to thank, in conclusion, all the witnesses. This was a very enlightening panel that we had. We've learned a lot, and it will be you will see that your submissions and what you've said here today will be a large part of our report and recommendations to Parliament. Thank you. And good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.